Chapter 454. Opening the Furnace and Concocting Pills. Ling Han had indeed decided to certify as a heaven-grade alchemist on an impulse. An 18-year-old heaven-grade alchemist was too dazzling a presence. Furthermore, he had yet to build up his own power base. If some sect like the Winter Moon sect or the Beast Emperor sect secretly kidnapped and imprisoned him to force him to concoct alchemical pills, what was he to do? On the surface, there was indeed no one who would dare do anything damaging to a heaven-grade alchemist, but in secret, he. After all, in this whole world, there were only two heaven-grade alchemists. Ling Han possessed the Black Tower and it was indeed enough to allow him to protect himself, but if the secret of the Black Tower was leaked, he could possibly encounter even more trouble. Just look, hadn't the Thousand Corpse sect already taken note of him? However, for his father's sake, Ling Han chose to be rash. He definitely needed to obtain the 9-leaf black Ganoderma so that he could concoct the Restore Spirit pill. The problem now was, could he actually concoct heaven-grade alchemical pills? After all, he now only had a spiritual pedestal tier cultivation level, and in theory, the highest grade he could concoct would be earth-grade mid-level pills. With the strange fire thrown into the mix, earth-grade high-level pills should be no problem, but heaven-grade? It was a matter of chance. He could only hope that Small Fire had been terribly trained enough in the Black Tower and thus had a big power upgrade. Otherwise, there was really a chance he could fail. Losing face was not that important, but the important thing here would be that he would not be able to snatch back the 9-leaf black Ganoderma. Ling Han gathered his scattered thoughts, and drew out a stalk of Spirit Heart Heaven Spring Bamboo from within the Black Tower. This was a spirit herb that could be used to concoct the most commonly seen Return Origin pill, which was used to replenish origin power. However, the Spring Heart Heaven Spring Bamboo was used to concoct a high-grade Return Origin pill. A 10-year-old herb could allow a spiritual infant tier cultivator to instantly recover 1/10 of his origin power. A 100-year-old one was effective for a deity transformation tier cultivator, whereas a 1,000-year-old herb could be used by a heaven tier cultivator. Ling Han obtained a 100-year-old Spirit Heart Heaven Spring Bamboo in the Devil Sky Mystery Realm which, after close to a year of growing in the Black Tower, had now reached 1,000 years old, and could now be used to concoct the highest-grade Return Origin pill. An alchemical pill that was to be used by a heaven-tier cultivator was naturally a heaven-grade alchemical pill. Though heaven-grade alchemical pills could also be categorized into low, mid, and high-level pills, because the pill grade was too high, heaven-grade low-level pills were directly referred to as heaven-grade. Heaven-grade mid-level pills were called saint-grade, and heaven-grade high-level pills were called immortal-grade. Saint-grade alchemical pills were effective for shattering void tier cultivators, whereas immortal-grade pills truly did not belong to this world. In his last life, Ling Han could concoct out saint-grade alchemical pills, and had touched a bit on immortal-grade alchemical pills as well. He had even found some substitute ingredients and managed to concoct pseudo-immortal-grade alchemical pills, which also proved that his talent in alchemy was unparalleled in both ancient and modern times, and was extremely awesome. The name of Alchemy Emperor was not something that had come from mere praise, but had been obtained through genuine talent and skill. Those two heaven-grade alchemists of the middle state should be heaven-grade low-level alchemists. It could not be concocted by any kind of earth-grade alchemist, and would be more than enough for him to pass the certification. More importantly, he did not have any other heaven-grade ingredients. Ling Han began to sort the ingredients. The Spirit Heart Heaven Spring Bamboo was the main ingredient, but other supplementary ingredients were needed as well. His movements were natural and smooth, making all those alchemists who were observing him from outside dumbfounded. Sorting out ingredients could actually be done so elegantly, and actually seemed so beautiful. Zhu Xian'er's heart throbbed loudly. Though she had been called the greatest beauty of the North region, and one of the strongest of the younger generation, if you were to ask her if she could actually speak with a heaven-grade alchemist, then that would be mere fantasy for her. In the whole middle state, there were only two heaven-grade alchemists, and their status could be considered to be on par with Shattering Void tier ultimate elites. Was she qualified to converse with an ultimate elite cultivator of the Shattering Void tier? Of course not. Thus, Tang Zuming's threat and temptation was extremely effective. If she wanted to ask those two heaven-grade alchemists to concoct alchemical pills, making her request through their younger descendants was the most effective method. Otherwise, Zhu Xian'er could only wait until she had developed to the level that even heaven-grade alchemists would have to give her some face the Shattering Void tier. Setting aside the question whether Zhu Xian'er would be able to advance to the Shattering Void tier, even if she could, when would that be? But if Ling Han could successfully become a heaven-grade alchemist, Zhu Xian'er's heart throbbed uncontrollably. She should be considered Ling Han's friend, right? And since they were friends, then helping her out should not be anything too difficult for him, right? In this moment, she hoped tremendously that Ling Han could succeed. Tang Zuming sneered. There were a total of 27 Earth-grade high-level alchemists in the Middle State, and they have been barraging the doorstep to become a heaven-grade alchemist for a whole 100 years. But ultimately, none managed to take this final step. What was the reason for that? That one step was much too hard to breach. An 18-year-old youngster wanted to succeed. That was really much too naive of him. However, he was still quite astonished by Ling Han's movements, because he, too, was a genius alchemist who was already a black-grade high-level alchemist in his mere 20s, which was proof enough of his extraordinary talent in alchemy. Ling Han's movements were much too practiced, and made him feel inferior. He even had the thought to stealthily learn, but looking at how his movements seemed blurred to the eye, he had absolutely no idea where to begin stealthily learning from. At first, it was quite noisy, but an absolute silence had fallen over them all in this moment. They were all watching Ling Han quietly. The rhythm of his movements actually caused a powerful resonance to arise in all of them, as if something was about to gush out from within their bodies. After sorting the ingredients, Ling Han entered into the purification stage. Those amazing movements of his naturally caused his audience to be shocked and stunned, and quite a number even exclaimed in surprise, but they were quickly silenced by multiple disdainful looks from their companions. The most important stage was here, and that was the pill concoction stage. No matter how beautifully you sorted the ingredients, or how amazingly you had purified them, if you were not able to concoct the alchemical pill, then everything would be worthless. Ling Han sharpened his focus and calmed his emotions. Then he summoned the strange fire and thought, "Small fire, it's up to you now." Hong, a crimson-red flame suddenly arose. If one looked closely enough, there was actually a small spot of purple in the heart of the flame, making it appear out of the ordinary. Ling Han was surprised. Small fire was indeed very different from before. Compared to how it was early on, after small fire swallowed another strange fire, there would indeed be a great power upgrade. But the greater change should have originated from being upgraded by the Black Tower, making it really experience a true rebirth. Heaven-grade alchemical pill. There was hope. The flames roared fiercely, and the light of the fire shone brilliantly. No way to use such a powerful flame right from the very beginning. Isn't he afraid that he would lose control? That's right, the furnace could explode at any moment. Immediately, a great number of people began to shake their heads. Ling Han's skill in sorting out the ingredients and purifying them made them feel ashamed of their inferiority. But his skill in pill concoction, AI, it was really a bit poor. Such a person managed to become an Earth-grade alchemist too? Probably mere boasting. Though many aged, serious-looking elders did not say a thing, their eyes revealed their disappointment. At first, they had really thought that Ling Han was slightly assured of his success based on how aggressive and confident he had been. They had never thought that it was a mere show of false bravado from him. AI, the latter was only a youngster, so why had they, for some unknown reason, placed their faith in him? What a joke! The furnace fire burned fiercely, reaching all the way to ceiling, forcing Ling Han to have no choice but to activate his thunder battle armor to withstand such extreme heat. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Time passed extremely quickly. So much time has already passed. But why has the furnace not exploded yet? That's right, it's at least been 3 hours, so shouldn't it have long since exploded? Could it be that there is some hope for success? Impossible! I would guess that the ingredients he used were not heaven-grade in the first place, and he is simply concocting a false heaven-grade alchemical pill. Hey! He couldn't have been so reckless, could he? The spectators all discussed spiritedly, whereas Tang Zuming simply broke out into uproarious laughter. How could heaven-grade alchemical pills be so easily concocted? Ling Han must have failed early on, and was merely adamant on not admitting his defeat now. He had to be merely putting on a farce now for the sake of his pride. Chapter 455. Appearance of the Pill Tribulation. Another 3 hours passed. Lord Gongyang, what are we to do? Someone asked Gongyang Tai's son for guidance. What do you mean, what are we to do? Certification as a heaven-grade alchemist can last for 3 days and 3 nights. Only 6 hours have passed by now and you're asking me what we are to do? Could it be that you think that I will step out to stop him? Gongyang Tai Sun huffed. That person smiled sheepishly as he thought, doesn't everyone already know that Ling Han had already failed? So what is the point of continuing to waste everyone's feelings? Let's go, let's go. There's nothing much to see here. That's right. Let's all just go back, embrace our wives and sleep. You speak as if you actually have a wife. Pei, believe it or not, I'll embrace your wife and sleep. The crowds quickly dispersed, and there were only a few servants left behind outside. A spoilt young master like Tang Zuming naturally was short of patience. Otherwise, with a great-grandfather that was a heaven-grade alchemist, he might have already advanced into earth-grade by now. He released a yawn and said, Gao Feng, stand guard here, I'm going to go back and sleep. Look closely, you must definitely not allow this brat to escape. The moment 3 days have passed, I want to personally kill him. Yes, young master. Zhua Gao Feng replied respectfully. Tang Zuming once again snickered in Zhu Xian'er's direction. He was sure that this beauty would very soon concede to his will, and obediently undress herself before pleasing him on the bed. He could not help but shudder in anticipation, feeling slightly impatient. In fact, he wanted very much to immediately force himself upon her right this very instant. There was no need to rush. This beautiful creature was destined to be served up on his plate. 4 spiritual pedestal tier cultivators, as long as they had not engaged in fierce battle, it would be no problem for them to endure a wait that could last over 10 days and all the way up to half a month. Thus, Zhu Xian'er and Zhua Gao Feng both stood guard outside the alchemy chamber. Aside from the two of them, Elder Shi and Gongyang Tai Sun were there as well, and together with a number of earth-grade alchemists, there were in total about 10 people still waiting. 1 day passed, 2 days passed, and Ling Han was still endlessly embroiled in the pill concoction process. Furthermore, more and more people had once again returned to the alchemy chamber. Ling Han appeared not to have failed yet. They could clearly see that while Ling Han was concocting the alchemical pills, he drew out multiple patterns from the alchemy furnace, and after making slight adjustments, shot them back onto the furnace. Those were the patterns that belonged to the various ingredients within the alchemy furnace, and carried with them the essence of nature which formed natural patterns. Pill concoction involved merging these various patterns in a specific way and, ultimately, creating a shocking effect from them. However, the manipulation of these patterns that belonged to the ingredients would only be used in the process of concocting a heaven-grade alchemical pill. When they saw how these patterns fluttered, as well as Ling Han's practiced beautiful movements, all the alchemists felt their hair stand on ends in their extreme shock. This youngster was really concocting a heaven-grade alchemical pill. Crap. Furthermore, the furnace had not yet exploded even though 2 whole days had passed. Instead, the divinity and essence of the ingredients had been slowly extracted, and revealed the most intrinsic patterns. This showed that Ling Han was still proceeding smoothly and successfully up till this point. This is really too astonishing. Could it be that he would really succeed? All of them were unsure. However, in Ling Han's case, he was extremely relaxed by this point. He was the alchemy emperor. What level had he been at in his last life? Saint grade. He had even concocted pseudo-immortal grade alchemical pills, so it would not be an exaggeration to consider him to be a pseudo-immortal grade alchemist. The only thing he lacked was the ability to raise the maximum heat level of his flames, and aside from this, there was naturally nothing else he had left to fear. He moved confidently, his 10 fingers moving as if he was strumming the strings of a Qin one. So relaxed and smooth were his movements. One after another, patterns appeared, and he adjusted every single one of them before throwing them back into the alchemy furnace. The patterns corresponded to the changes in the medicinal effects of the contents of the alchemy furnace, and with his adjustment, they melded together and headed in the direction that he wanted them to go. Sometimes, Ling Han would even close his eyes, as if he had once again returned to his last life. Heaven-grade alchemical pills were a piece of cake, and saint-grade alchemical pills were no big issue, either. Considering the level that Ling Han had grasped alchemy in his last life, as long as he was given real immortal-grade alchemical pills, he might even be able to concoct immortal-grade alchemical pills. Hey. Did I see wrongly? Why do I feel like I saw him close his eyes just now? I saw that too. Fuck. Is this guy a freak or something? He can actually be so inattentive even in the midst of concocting a heaven-grade alchemical pill? The spectators all erupted into a shocked clamor. They had really been astonished by Ling Han's actions. Ling Han's movements became increasingly skillful. He knew every step like it was the back of his hand. His fingers seemed to have a spirit of their own and twisted the unique nature of each ingredient easily, moving in a relaxed and pleasurable manner. As the time limit for the 3 days neared, more and more patterns steamed out of the alchemy furnace. Merely a glance was enough to turn the faces of the earth-grade alchemists green, yet Ling Han was absolutely unconcerned. The movements of his hands sped up correspondingly in an organized, amazingly calm manner. Tang Zuming had once again returned, and when he saw this scene, he could not help but wear a dark expression. Even if Ling Han failed in his next step, this kind of standard was really close to heaven grade. An 18-year-old quasi-heaven grade alchemist. That was too horrifying. Finally, Ling Han had forced back every single pattern into the alchemy furnace, and no other emerged. The time was also close to the end of the 3-day-long process. Suddenly a dark cloud appeared in the middle of what had been clear skies. There had been absolutely no warning, and within the cloud, lightning flashed closely together, making a loud crackling noise. It said that when a heaven-grade alchemical pill has been successfully concocted, a thunder tribulation would befall it so as to prevent it from leaving the alchemy furnace. This means that Ling Han has really concocted heaven-grade alchemical pills? Otherwise, how could he have possibly drawn out a calamity of thunder? However, this is also the very hardest step. If the alchemical pills concocted are not up to standard, then they would be turned to ash by this thunder tribulation. But if they were up to standard, they would absorb the power of heaven's Tao in it and truly come to possess heaven-grade effects. If a deity transformation tier cultivator swallowed a heaven-grade alchemical pill, even he would explode and die. There would be no way he could withstand the power of heaven's Tao. But, will we be affected by the thunder tribulation too? All their expressions turned a bit dark. They had never before experienced it. They had never even witnessed one actually taking place. They had only heard of its occurrence through hearsay. Retreat! Retreat! Gong Yang Tai Sun's expression changed drastically. As an earth-grade mid-level alchemist, he was naturally aware that the moment a heaven-grade alchemical pill left the alchemy furnace, a thunder tribulation would be drawn out. That was not something to play around with. All of them hurriedly fled in all directions. Everyone was now sure by now that Ling Han was indeed concocting heaven-grade alchemical pills. Otherwise, there was no way he would have drawn out a thunder tribulation. Then as long as the alchemical pill withstood it, Ling Han would be a genuine heaven-grade alchemist. Even if it did not manage to withstand the might of thunder, he was still qualified to be considered a quasi-heaven-grade alchemist. Elder Shi and Zhua Gaofeng's faces turned slightly green. Though one of them was in the spiritual infant tier while the other was in flower blossom tier, if they really opposed a heaven-grade alchemist, at any instant, others could tear them apart into multiple pieces so small that not even bones remained. There was a great number of people who would beg a heaven-grade alchemist to concoct alchemical pills for them, and there was no shortage of ultimate elites like those in the heaven tier and the deity transformation tier. In front of these true elites, what could the spiritual infant tier count as? Even if there was a restriction in place to stop them, and the deity transformation tier cultivators would be greatly weakened if they made their way here, as long as Ling Han gave a holler, it was guaranteed that all the spiritual infant tier cultivators in the whole north region would obey him. He did not have to be a heaven-grade alchemist. Being a quasi-heaven-grade alchemist was enough. That was because spiritual infant tier cultivators had no need of heaven-grade alchemical pills anyways, as earth-grade alchemical pills would be more than enough. Chapter 456. Heaven-grade alchemist, Ling Han. Tang Zuming could feel his facial muscles twitch madly too. He knew that even if Ling Han failed, there was definitely no one who would dare to touch a quasi-heaven-grade alchemist. Even if his great-grandfather was here, he would think highly of Ling Han as well. An 18-year-old quasi-heaven-grade alchemist. Was he still far off from becoming a true heaven-grade alchemist? Why was there such a freak in this world? How was anyone else supposed to live when he set such a high standard? Only Zhu Xian'er's beautiful eyes shone brightly. She knew that Ling Han possessed extraordinary talent in alchemy, but had never imagined that he would really be able to become a heaven-grade alchemist. This was a colossal pleasant shock for her. Pang! Ling Han simply picked up the alchemy furnace and walked out. With a sweep of his eyes, he discovered an empty public square and hurriedly raced there. Everyone knew that he intended to have the alchemical pills withstand the calamity of thunder there, and thus gathered around it and stood firmly to watch. Ling Han reached his destination.
His right hand suddenly opened the lid of the alchemy furnace and 3 jade green immediately pills shot out of the furnace and fled in different directions as if they had a life of their own.
But it was precisely at this moment that the thunder tribulation took place, without any prior warning at all. Quang! 3 bolts of lightning struck at the same time. They struck the 3 alchemical pills, and pa, all 3 alchemical pills immediately fell down from midair. Ling Han moved swiftly and caught each of them. However, one of them had been directly turned into ash, and only 2 fell into his hands. This was the most ordinary return origin pill, and had thus attracted the most ordinary kind of thunder tribulation. 1 strike and it was over. When Ling Han had concocted pseudo-immortal grade alchemical pills in his last life, he had actually drawn out a 9-colored divine lightning that almost spread to him even. When he recalled it even at this moment, he could still feel his heart speed up quickly and turn ashen pale in terror. He gripped the 2 return origin pills in his hands and raised them high. The alchemical pills had not turned into ash. He had succeeded. Gods, an 18-year-old heaven-grade alchemist. Though no one knew what kind of alchemical pill Ling Han had concocted, knowing that these 2 pills were heaven-grade alchemical pills was enough for them. Respectful greetings, Grandmaster Ling. All the alchemists knelt. Even Gongyang Tai's son was no exception, a fire flickering in his eyes. Gods, finally, a heaven-grade alchemist had emerged from the North region. Moreover, it was a record-breaking 18-year-old youngster. Who could compare to that kind of achievement at any time in history? Even that Ling Han, who had been acclaimed as the alchemy emperor 10,000 years ago, would have to admit defeat in face of such an outstanding feat. How strange, the 2 geniuses of alchemy from 2 different generations were actually both named Ling Han. What an astonishing coincidence. Elder Shi knelt. Zhuo Gaofeng hesitated slightly before he, too, knelt. Only Tang Zuming was shaking in fear. Gods, he had actually commanded someone to hunt down and kill a heaven-grade alchemist. Even if his great-grandfather was here, there was no way he could save him. He was done for. He was finished. He was so terrified that his knees were shaking. He wanted to flee back to the Middle State, hide in the Tang residence, and never leave, but it was as if his feet weighed 10,000 pounds. He could not take a single step at all. Ling Han casually stored away the 2 return origin pills. He would not be able to sell them at all in the North region. He would have to wait until he went to the other 3 regions or the Middle Sea. In this whole world and era, the only people who would be able to exert some form of control over Ling Han would be the other 2 heaven-grade alchemists. However, they were both in the Middle State, too far to be able to help. Pa! Tang Zuming knelt down and sobbed. Please spare me, Grandmaster Ling. I beg you to spare me, Grandmaster Ling. After tossing and turning restlessly, he could only come up with this phrase. He was truly so terrified that he was completely out of his wits. Ling Han rushed forth and immediately gave him a thrashing. This also meant that he had no intention to commit murder. Otherwise, why would he have gone to so much trouble? If he really wanted to kill Tang Zuming, he needed only wave his sword and it was done. However, this was possibly a descendant of his disciple, so he decided to educate him properly. Everyone else was struck dumb. Who would have imagined that a noble, prestigious heaven-grade alchemist would actually be so violent? He had actually gone ahead and thrashed Tang Zuming in public openly. What was the difference between his actions and those of a common thug then? The imposing image that Ling Han had just established collapsed instantly. Of course, his deterrent force as a heaven-grade alchemist did not lessen in the slightest. He was still an existence that they could all only gaze up at in admiration and reverence. When he was finally satisfied with his thrashing, Ling Han stopped and declared, "The 9-leaf black Ganoderma, hand it over." Tang Zuming was stunned at first. Then he realized that he was still alive. And he was no idiot. He had merely been scared stupid just now. Now that he thought about it, since Ling Han was willing to beat him up, that meant that Ling Han did not intend to kill him. He could not help but feel a great joy for getting a new lease of life. He quickly took out the 9-leaf black Ganoderma from his spatial ring and handed it over to Ling Han. He then said, "I'm sorry, Grandmaster Ling. Because this is a necessary ingredient in one of the alchemical pills that my great-grandfather is in the midst of concocting, I had bought it over." "Hang, it's not rare for you to use your great-grandfather's name, is it?" Ling Han asked coldly. Tang Zuming's heart shook. He could hear the displeasure in Ling Han's voice and quickly assured, "I will definitely change my habits, I won't do it again." Ling Han humphed and shot out a finger which pressed down on Tang Zhu Ming's dantian.
"Grandmaster Ling, what did you do to me?"
Tang Zhu Ming asked hurriedly. He did not feel anything odd happen in his body, but absolutely did not believe that Ling Han would give him a tap for no reason. Ling Han smiled calmly and said, "I just made you unable to be a man." "Ah!" Tang Zhu Ming screeched shrilly. He was incredibly fond of womanly charms, so if he'd lost his ability as a man, then what was left for him to live for? "No!" he cried in incredible grief. "No, no, no. I want to be a man. I want to be a man." "Shut up." Ling Han gave him a slap. "It would not be difficult for you to return to being a man, but that would depend on your future performance." Tang Zhu Ming nodded his head repeatedly like pounding a stalk of scallion repeatedly, and said, "I will definitely perform well. I will definitely perform very well."
Ling Han nodded and said, "Then we'll see."
Tang Zhu Ming could not help but be disappointed. He naturally hoped to immediately regain his ability as a man, but could he actually force Ling Han to release the restriction on him? He wanted to weep but had no tears. If he had known this would happen, he should have fled back to the middle state 2 days ago. He would not have clashed with Ling Han, either. Gods, they had never even seen a heaven-grade alchemist, so they naturally had to admire him for a few moments longer. Meanwhile, Elder Shi and Zhuo Gaofeng were both kneeling in front of Ling Han, asking for pardon respectively.
"Grandmaster Ling, please forgive our previous lack in manners."
Neither of them placed any importance on their pride or reputation, and directly began to slap themselves severely. There was nothing else they could do.
This was a heaven-grade alchemist. In the whole world, there were only 3, and their status was on par with ultimate elites of the Shattering Void tier.
Who would dare offend such an existence? Ling Han was irritated and said, "Don't follow me, I still have things to do. As for you two, head to my restaurant and work for a month. If you perform well, I will forget what has happened a few days ago. If you do not, hee. We will definitely perform well." Elder Shi and Zhuo Gaofeng declared simultaneously, their expressions filled with pleasant surprise. Chapter 457. Arrangements for Various Matters. Dark Angel _ Forget Not created another record.
Previously, there were 2 members of the Prodigy role working in the restaurant, and this had already led to a very big commotion because those people on the Prodigy role were definitely going to advance to the Flower Blossom tier. Yet now, not only was there a strong elite of the Flower Blossom tier willingly here to work as a waiter, there was even a mighty elite of the Spiritual Infant tier who did not mind doing such menial tasks like serving food and drinks. That was the Spiritual Infant tier they were talking about here, an existence at the very apex of martial arts in the North region.
Now, who would dare create trouble in Forget Not? Even the Thousand Corpse sect would have some reservations, right? Could they lose everything in one go without any rewards and suffer a double loss after trying to harm their foe?
Not just the 2 of them. Tang Zhu Ming had also docilely came here to work, and his identity was very soon known, a black-grade high-level alchemist, and moreover, the direct descendant of one of the 2 heaven-grade alchemists of the Central Prefecture, Tang Zhi.
Fuck. When they heard that information, everyone could not help but exclaim in their extreme shock. This was somewhat even more shocking and astonishing than a powerful elite of the Spiritual Infant tier working as a waiter. What kind of noble, prestigious status did the young master of the Tang clan possess? It could be claimed that even in the well-known 3 great sects and single valley of the North region, he could do as he liked. Even powerful Spiritual Infant tier cultivators would have to bow their heads in deference to him, but now he was obediently working as a waiter. Fuck. Yet Ling Han was completely uninterested in all of this. He had initially planned to rush back to the Rain Country, but the 12 Heaven Mystery Realms were about to open very soon, and he had managed to obtain the key to the Sagittarius Palace Hall. If he missed this chance, then he would have to wait another 100 years. After much consideration, he decided to concoct the Restore Spirit pill first, then have someone send it back to the Rain Country so that Ling Dongxing could heal his spirit base. He would then make a trip home after he came out of the Mystery Realms. Furthermore, now that he had regained the status of a heaven-grade alchemist, he naturally should not waste it. He immediately wrote a letter which he sent back to the Winter Moon sect to request them to release his mother. Of course, he would not say that Yu Hongchang was his mother,
to prevent some people like the AO clan getting dangerous ideas to make use of Yu Hongchang to exert some control over him. He only requested them to release her in a forceful manner, and demanded for her to be brought to Extreme Yang City where she would be sent to live temporarily in the North Pill Pavilion. He did not offer any reason at all.
So what if he didn't? I am a heaven-grade alchemist, and I am really as willful as that. So what can you do about it?
It would take about a month's time from the moment that the 12 heaven mystery realms appeared out of thin air until the moment that others could officially enter. By now, more than a dozen days had passed, and after another dozen over days, it would be completely open. However, in these dozen over days, Ling Han was extremely vexed. All the alchemists in the North Pill Pavilion saw him as their idol, and every single one of them was a fanatic who came every single day to pay their respectful greetings.
It was all right even if they were not able to see him personally.
They would definitely still kneel down outside and pay their respects. They already thought of Ling Han as the object of their faith and a totem for them to revere. With so many people coming to pay their respects, naturally, the news could not be kept secret forever. The residents of Extreme Yang City finally found out that the owner of Forget Not and Alchemist King Pavilion was actually a newly advanced heaven-grade alchemist. No wonder there were so many important people racing there to work, and no wonder that the Alchemist King Pavilion would make such a boast. Could a heaven-grade alchemist still not be claimed as a king? For Ji Derong and Shui Gucheng, they no longer considered the matter of them working at Forget Not a disgrace. On the other hand, this had become a source of pride for them. Just take a look. The two of us were the first cultivators to work at Forget Not, and that was even sooner than any cultivator of the spiritual infant tier or the flower blossom tier.
In terms of hierarchy, those two would have to address them as senior apprentice brothers. Ling Han was actually quite free. He had already concocted the Restore Spirit Pill and especially requested Lu Ji Tong to run this errand. With an Earth-grade low-level alchemist by his side to take care of him, there would definitely be no problems in Ling Dongxing's recovery process. Gong Yang Tai Sun even personally made a trip to the Winter Moon sect. With an Earth-grade mid-level alchemist present, as well as the written decree of a heaven-grade alchemist, he did not believe that the Winter Moon sect would purposely delay matters and refuse to release his mother. He was spending every day studying the Chengdu Heaven Star Array. By drawing parallels through inference, he felt that it should facilitate his sword skills. Young Master Han, Miss Zhu Xian requests an audience with you. Ling Han had just been deducing the Tao of the array in the courtyard when Zhu Wujiu knocked on the door and announced his guest in a low voice. Ling Han hesitated slightly, then said, "Let her come in." "Yes." Zhu Wujiu replied, then left.
Actually, if it was any other person, he would definitely not come and inform Ling Han. However, Zhu Xian was the greatest beauty of the North region, and he truly hoped that she could become Ling Han's wife. Only the greatest beauty of the North region would be qualified to stand beside a man like Ling Han, after all. After a moment, a light knock sounded on the courtyard doors again, and two people entered. Zhu Xian as well as Zhu Longxing. The Zhu Xian now had not even a little bit of arrogance left in her attitude. She could not help but bow her head and maintain a submissive posture, looking very well behaved. "Xian pays my respects to Grandmaster Ling." Zhu Xian lowered her body and paid her respects. Her white skirts spread out as she lowered into a bow, as if she was an exquisite fresh flower that was blooming. Zhu Longxing hurriedly bowed in respect as well and said, "My respectful greetings, young Master Han." Ling Han raised his hand and asked, "What's the matter?" He did not have any time he could waste. "Grandmaster Ling, can you help Xian concoct the Subduing Tiger Heaven Fortune Pill?" Zhu Xian directed a very hopeful look at Ling Han. "I can," Ling Han agreed quite quickly. "As long as you can get me the ingredients, and I'll offer you a friends-only price. A level 9 spirit tool should be enough as my fee, or 10 level 8 spirit tools would be acceptable too. However, in the case of level 7 spirit tools, I would like at least 1,000 of them." Zhu Xian's face had turned completely pale. Even if she was the greatest beauty of the North region, if she really sold herself, would she actually manage to get a level 9 spirit tool in exchange? "Haha, I was just joking. No matter what, we're friends after all, so just get me the ingredients," Ling Han said with a grin. Zhu Xian breathed out in relief, but her face was still extremely troubled. Though the fee for pill concoction was waived, the Subduing Tiger Heaven Fortune Pill needed a total of 3 heaven-grade ingredients, and they were not that much cheaper than a level 9 spirit tool.
How could a mere spiritual pedestal tier cultivator like her get her hands on them? Grandmaster Ling, you are a heaven-grade alchemist, so you should have some means to obtain those 3 main ingredients, right? She probed. Ling Han humphed and said, have you been spoilt rotten by others? Do I have any kind of relationship with you? Why must I help you? You are indeed quite pretty, but that is all there is. Don't think all in this world are fools. With such a harsh rebuke from Ling Han, Zhu Xian'er could feel herself instantly tear up. She had never thought that being beautiful was something she should be happy about. If it wasn't for the fact that she possessed extraordinary talent in martial arts, she would definitely have long become Somoin's toy to be played around with as they liked. But in front of such a forceful young master like Tang Zuming, she felt very helpless, because the former could easily grip her weakness, and could even use forceful means to obtain her body. Not everyone was as gentlemanly as Yao Huiyu. There was indeed no one who would dare to do anything to her in the North region, but the whole world did not merely consist of the North region. Grandmaster Ling! She looked at Ling Han miserably, her beautiful eyes delicate and sad. Even a heart of stone would melt for her. However, Ling Han's martial intent was even sturdier than iron. His heart did not soften in the slightest. He merely continued to stare coolly at this genius beauty. Zhu Xian'er gritted her teeth and said, Xian'er knows what to do now. Then, she actually turned around and left. Yet Ling Han was a little confused. What did she know? But who cares? Why haven't you left yet? He swept a glance over Zhu Longxing. Zhu Longxing leaned close and said with a bootlicking expression, Hee, brother-in-law. Pooh, Ling Han instantly spat out a mouthful of water all over his face. Chapter 458. Arriving at the mysterious valley. Dark Angel _ Cough. Cough. Ling Han erupted into an endless bout of coughing, looked at Zhu Longxing and asked, Who are you calling brother-in-law? Hee, my sister is so beautiful, and brother-in-law, you are so brilliant and mighty. So whom would my sister marry if not you? The two of you are definitely a match made in heaven, and there is no other who would be a better match. Zhu Longxing leaned closer, acting chummy. Rubbish! Ling Han shot him a glare. Yet Zhu Longxing was not the slightest bit scared and was still all smiles as he said, Brother-in-law, you haven't seen my sister's face. If you had, you would definitely fall in love with my sister. She's so beautiful that a single glance would be able to captivate you. Ling Han looked at him strangely. Was this guy Zhu Xian'er's younger brother or someone trying to pimp her out? Thinking about it in this way, Zhu Xian'er was indeed quite pitiful. Aside from having to run all over the place for her master who had suffered a Dao injury, she also had such a worrisome younger brother who was so determined to marry her off to a powerful, noble person in order to shelter him from the wind and rain. Ling Han was irritated and gave him a slight tap with his finger. Brother-in-law, what did you do? Zhu Longxing asked, confused. Ling Han smiled and said, I made you temporarily lose your ability as a man. What ability as a man? At first, Zhu Longxing was clueless before he finally came to realization. Instantly, he was so terrified that he began to screech shrilly. Brother-in-law, how could you do this to me? I am extremely loyal to you and have full intentions to marry my sister off to you. Ling Han clapped his shoulder and said, As long as you stop calling me brother-in-law, I will consider releasing the seal on you. Brother-in-law, Zhu Longxing was extremely determined in this matter. You truly don't want to be a man? Ling Han asked surprised. Brother-in-law, I will wait until you change your mind, Zhu Longxing declared with great confidence. He was not an idiot. On the contrary, he was a very smart young man. Who was Ling Han? He was merely 18 years old, yet had already become a heaven-grade alchemist of which there were only 3 in this whole world, and was the greatest person in the entire North region. Furthermore, his cultivation level had reached the spiritual pedestal tier, and in the previous test for battle prowess prior to the Prodigy tournament, he had even delivered a blow with an estimated 20 stars of the spiritual infant tier battle prowess. A man with such genius in both alchemy and martial arts, how many millennia would pass for even one to appear? Was there any stronger backer than this one? The moment Zhu Longxing heard that Ling Han had become a heaven-grade alchemist, he was determined to have Ling Han as his brother-in-law. As long as he could become Ling Han's brother-in-law, who in this whole world would dare to touch a hair on his head?
the brother-in-law of a heaven-grade alchemist, wouldn't that be even more awesome than the sect master of the Winter Moon sect or the pavilion master of the North Pill Pavilion? As a result, he did not mind suffering a little bit now. He was extremely confident in his sister's charm, and believed completely that she would definitely be able to move Ling Han. And once Ling Han became his brother-in-law, would he still have to worry about some seal on him not being released? By then, he would naturally return to a state of vigor and health, and who knows how many beautiful women would willingly fall into his arms. Tolerating for this one moment would lead to a lifetime of brilliance. It was the easiest choice for him to make. Brother-in-law, marrying her is definitely not a loss, Zhu Longxing cajoled. Ling Han looked at Zhu Longxing, smiled, and said, "Whoever calls you a fool must definitely be a fool himself." As someone who had lived 2 lifetimes, he was naturally aware what kind of plans Zhu Longxing had in mind. Zhu Long smiled modestly, making sure his attitude was as humble as possible. No matter what, he would definitely not miss out on this wonderful match. On the second day, unexpectedly, Zhu Xian'er actually went to Forget Not and took the initiative to do menial tasks like serving dishes and wine. This immediately made Forget Not an even greater focus point of attention, especially when it was already the source of much commotion in the first place. The greatest beauty of the North region was actually here to work as a waitress as well. Forget Not that was already crowded to bursting point in the first place instantly experienced an upgrade in the length of the queues waiting outside. It could not be denied. The attraction level of a beautiful woman instantly defeated any spiritual infant tier or flower blossom tier cultivator. At least, there had not been so many customers attracted by the spectacle of Elder Shi and Zhua Gao Feng working as waiters. Ling Han was surprised. So this was the realization that Zhu Xian'er had come to? To be a waitress. He really could not comprehend the logic of women. There was no word to describe the charm of Zhu Xian'er. Merely 2 or 3 days had passed, and Zhu Wujiu, Can Yi, and Guang Yuan had all become her solid supporters. Even Lu Yutong and Li Xichan had been won over, and they completely did not treat her like an outsider. There was no need to mention Zhu Longxing, of course. He was completely a self-proclaimed brother-in-law. His skin was thick enough that no arrow would be able to pierce through. By now, only Hu Niu was in the same camp with Ling Han. This little girl had never had any fondness for Zhu Xian'er, and she was even more displeased at the sight of her now. She would always bare her little white teeth at the latter as if she wanted to pounce and take a bite out of her. The day that the 12 heaven mystery realms would open was getting nearer and nearer. Thus, Ling Han brought all the members of his group and set off. Zhu Xian'er was naturally traveling alongside them as well. She seemed to have inherited her younger brother's thick skin too, and did not feel that there was anything strange in this arrangement. The site where the 12 heaven mystery realms would open was located 10,000 miles east of Extreme Yang City, and taking Ling Han's speed into account, it was a trip of about 4 days. The group hired 2 carriages in total. The men would be in one, and the women would be in the other. Initially, Ling Han would definitely have sat with Lu Yutong and the others, but because there was Zhu Xian'er present this time, he chose to sit with Can Yi and the other men because he would be able to use the Black Tower without Zhu Xian'er's knowledge. On their way there, it was inevitable that they would encounter robbers and thieves, but either one of Zhu Wujiu, Guang Yuan, or Can Yi stepped out each time and the matter was resolved. They would easily thrash any band of thieves to utter, absolute defeat. After 4 days, they arrived at the Marshall Gu Valley. By now, a great number of cultivators had arrived as well. They had set up tents outside the valley, and were currently waiting for the mystery realms to open. This valley was very mysterious. It was hidden all year round by an endless fog. Anyone who stepped in would definitely lose all sense of direction, and thus be trapped within until their death. Only in the month prior to the day that the mystery realms opened would the fog that surrounded this place disappear. The entrance to the mystery realms was in the deepest parts of the valley. Thus, it was very simple to check whether the mystery realms had opened. One only needed send out some people to stand guard outside the valley's entrance, and observe whether the fog had dispersed yet. Fairy Zhu. When they saw Zhu Xian'er disembark from the carriage, at least over 100 young men rushed over. Every one of them had eyes that shone brightly, looking very fanatical. The title of the greatest beauty of the North region was not something that had come from empty praises. Zhu Xian'er was obviously used to this kind of situation. She smoothly responded, both elegant and cool, ensuring that everyone would not feel that they were able to approach her,
yet she would not cause anyone to feel bad. Her graceful bearing as a goddess was on full display. Ha ha ha, I have long heard that there is magnificent beauty in the North region. Indeed, it is a fully justified reputation. A young man strode out of the masses. He was only in his early 20s, with a tall height and long legs, as well as handsome and clean-cut features. He looked too dashing to be described by mere words. And what was more shocking was the fact that there was actually a pair of wings of light behind him that would spread out occasionally. With a light flap, the aura that emanated was extraordinarily overbearing. He strode over, and those on either side could not help but feel their spirits shake, and unable to stop themselves, knelt down. Chapter 459. East Region's Prodigy. Reverie _ This person was like a god spirit that descended to earth, his presence shocking. He was clearly only a spiritual pedestal tier warrior, but as his martial intent spread, its deterrence power was almost equal to that of the flower blossom tier. Behind him, several beautiful female martial artists held their cheeks, their gazes full of stars as they couldn't help but scream, appearing infatuated. He took large strides, arriving before Zhu Xian. The corner of his mouth quirked up, revealing a smile that would drive people crazy as he said, "Zhu Xian, take off the veil, let me see if you're qualified to be my bride." So handsome. So assertive. Wen Yijian, marry me, I am willing to be your bride. Quite a few female martial artists screamed, extremely fanatical. Zhu Xian's pretty face turned cold. As her gaze swept by Ling Han, she said indifferently, "Xian already regards Ling Han as master. As long as young Master Han agrees, Xian will naturally take off the veil." In other words, it meant that if Ling Han disagreed, then you can take a hike. What? As those words were said, everyone was stirred up. The girls were naturally indignant that Zhu Xian actually rejected such a super handsome man, and the men's eyes were red with envy. Regards Ling Han as master. What did that mean? Did you offer both your body and mind? In that moment, countless gazes that wished to kill all targeted Ling Han. If gazes were like swords, Ling Han would definitely have been slashed into shreds, and if gazes were like fire, Ling Han would definitely have been burned into ashes. Haha, you're that young Master Ling? The godlike youngster's gaze focused on Ling Han as he revealed a smile of disdain. I'm called Wan Yijian, and the future world's #1 sword. Haha, middle state has some idiot self-proclaimed world's second sword. Luckily, he didn't call himself the first sword, or else I'll definitely let him know what's called the way of the sword. So handsome. Hearing those bold words, many girls were smitten once again. Ling Han smiled indifferently and said, "Yao Hui, you certainly has the right to be called the world's second sword in the future, but as for you, I only see lowliness, and whether or not you can become the world's lowliest, that'll depend on how hard you try." Wan Yijian's expression immediately turned grim. He said, "You dare insult me?" "Insult you? I don't think so, I've only told truth as it is." Ling Han shrugged his shoulders. Wan Yijian laughed boisterously, facing the sky, and said, "In this world, no one can insult me." "Oh, you really think you're something?" Ling Han said with disdain. He originally had no interest in paying attention to such a person with exploding confidence, but when Yijian asked for trouble, "Apologize to me. If I'm satisfied, I'll just cripple one of your arms," Wan Yijian said loftily. Ling Han uttered an "oh" and said, "Judging by your tone, you don't seem to be from the North region." "No kidding. How could North region possibly have such a genius like me? I am East region's #1 genius in the way of the sword," Wan Yijian said without a shred of modesty. As his gaze swept by, seeing many men reveal infuriated expressions, he couldn't help but sneer. "What, not convinced? Then bring it on, I can beat you till you guys are convinced, starting from you." As he said the last words, he stared at Ling Han again. "You don't even have the right to fight with Master Ling." A white-clothed figure came in a flash. It was Shen Zhongcheng. "I'll defeat you." White-robed Sword King. The 8th place on the Prodigy roll. White-robed Sword King, mess up that asshole from the East region. Many men began shouting, as Wan Yijian's arrogance already incited the public's anger. You're at most a high-level Earth-grade alchemist. Although in terms of your age segment, this is already very impressive. Ha 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 ha. The entire place was instantly filled with laughter. Wan Yijian was baffled by the laughs and said balefully, "Were my words that funny?" "Idiot, young Master Ling is a heaven-grade alchemist." Zhu Wujiu yelled out. "Ha ha ha ha." This time, Wan Yijian burst into laughter, almost laughing to the point of tears. Wasn't this funny? Who didn't know that there were only 2 heaven-grade alchemists in all of the vast lands? But these 2 have diligently studied alchemy for countless years, so how could it possibly be the immature youngster before him became one as well? However, after he laughed for a while, he found that no one joined him, and all glanced at him as if looking at a fool, except for a few of the beauties that still had fanaticism in their gaze. Master Ling certainly is a heaven-grade alchemist, which the entire world reveres. An old man opened up. He was utmost Imperial Sex Flower Blossom Tier Elite, who specially escorted the Sex disciples in entering the Mystery Realm. Great Sorrow Sex Flower Blossom Tier Elite also said, "That's right, Master Ling is North Region's most distinguished genius, like no other." Respects to Master Ling. The Flower Blossom Tier warriors at the scene paid obeisance to Ling Han one after another. Alchemy and martial arts were not the same domain but were linked in countless ways. If not for Ling Han's low cultivation, these Flower Blossom Tier warriors would have to kneel to pay their respects. Ling Han simply raised his hand, appearing composed. He'd seen these occasions many times in his previous life, so he naturally wouldn't be flustered. Wan Yijian was finally greatly shocked. One Flower Blossom Tier warrior could be muddle-headed, but it was definitely impossible that several hundreds of Flower Blossom Tier martial artists all had strokes. Hiss, the youngster before him was truly a heaven-grade alchemist. Holy SHT, that was way too young. Alchemists had status beyond the norm, and even if you had no requests for one, you definitely couldn't offend them. Because offending an alchemist, especially a high-tier alchemist, meant many people would volunteer to stick up for the alchemist without the latter even asking. If word got out that he, Wan Yijian, was so frivolous towards a heaven-grade alchemist, then would there still be a place for him in the entire world? Wan Yijian was proud but not stupid, so he immediately lowered his arrogant head and said, "This lowly one didn't recognize Master Ling. I beg your pardon, Master Ling." Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "I'm actually not some heaven-grade alchemist, just a small martial artist. Weren't you going to teach me a lesson? Come, let's fight to our heart's content." Like hell, you think I'm stupid? No way Wan Yijian would believe that several hundred Flower Blossom Tier warriors would cooperate in acting with Ling Han, who was a mere spiritual pedestal tier. Was that possible? He laughed dryly and said, "Master Ling sure knows how to joke." He was also an extremely slick person, not stumped at all by Ling Han's words. "Wan Yijian, come fight." Shen Zhongcheng, however, was full of fighting spirit. He was also a sword user, and seeing a sword expert, he couldn't help but want to spar a bit. Wan Yijian just kicked an iron plate and was very embarrassed, so he naturally would want to regain face. Snorting at once, he said, "Since you want to be defeated so badly, I'll fulfill your wish." Chapter 460. The Powerful Wan Yijian. Reverie _ Shen Zhongcheng spoke no more superfluous words, directly thrusting his sword. Hong, he drove the sword towards Wan Yijian as if the thing driven wasn't a sword, but a mountain of swords, giving people a feeling of extreme heaviness. If pierced by this word, one would definitely be smashed into pieces. This was White-Robed Sword King's martial intent and belonged to his own way of the sword. Ling Han nodded inwardly. This younger generation already walked down a path that belonged to themselves. It was no wonder that it was said people on the prodigy roll could definitely become Flower Blossom Tier warriors. Each one was certainly out of the ordinary. Wan Yijian's expression, however, was full of disdain, and he unconcernedly pointed with a finger as a powerful sword intent circulated and a flash of sword light flashed. Hong, behind him 2 wings of light fluttered gently, making him seem like a god descending to earth. Pang! With the point of a finger, Shen Zhongcheng was immediately sent flying and the long sword almost slipped out of his hand. Yet he caught it forcibly as blood splattered from his perlicue, and even the skin ruptured, looking extremely tragic. Everyone was greatly shocked. That was Shen Zhongcheng, the White-Robed Sword King, the 29th place on the prodigy roll last year and this year's top 10, enough to represent those with the strongest battle prowess in North Region's younger generation. However, he was defeated in a single blow, and by only a finger.
Hiss, the difference was way too great. Everyone knew that with the 4 regions, Middle State's martial arts level was the highest, and the North region was the lowest of the 4 regions, without even deity transformation tier elites. However, did the younger generation also had such a great difference? Clearly, Wen Yijian was also in the spiritual pedestal tier, and even if he was at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, the gap shouldn't be so wide. You're no good. Wen Yijian shook his head and said, if you cultivate diligently till the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, becoming the same as me, then you would be barely qualified for me to use my sword. However, I'm truly a bit disappointed that this is your so-called genius on the prodigy roll, and ranked number 8? FCK, mocking crowd again. Hee, brother one, then let me battle you. Yang Junhao walked out, battle intent burning in his gaze. Wen Yijian glanced at him once and said, you have some strength, and are about the same age and cultivation as me, which means you're satisfactorily gifted. However, with the same martial arts tier, that only represents that our power is close, but power is only a part of battle prowess. You mean, although our tiers are the same, your battle prowess is far above mine? Yang Haojun said indifferently, but in his tone was an obvious fury. That's only natural. Wen Yijian said as if it was a matter of fact. I sure want to see for myself. Yang Junhao laughed instead of being angered. He shook his hand and unleashed his long sword. This was a spirit tool, entirely crimson red, and covered with vein-like lines. I'll let you have 3 moves and defeat you in 1, Wen Yijian said loftily, sweeping his gaze across the surrounding people. Yang Junhao sneered, and no longer said superfluous words, simply pouring power into the long sword and beginning to activate his spirit tool. Wang on the blade. The vein-like lines lit up one after another as ceaseless raging flames surged out, instantly raising the surrounding temperature by a whole lot. However, the raging flames surged in front of him, forming a casing, protecting him within, as if a shield. A spirit tool that was both offensive and defensive. Fiery sea and raging tides, sword of violent winds that breaks through void. Yang Junhao shouted loudly, leaping out and bring a sea of flames with mighty momentum. Wen Yijian shifted his feet, evading swiftly. Shwa, Yang Junhao attacked repeatedly, while Wen Yijian kept dodging. It was as if Yang Junhao had taken the upper hand. As expected of the first on the prodigy roll. This strength is too powerful. Defeat this arrogant disciple of the East region, and let him know that we North region aren't to be provoked. Everyone complimented one after another, while the girls that were crazy about Wen Yijian were extremely nervous, gripping their hands tightly in front of their chests and praying for Wen Yijian. 3 moves have passed, Wen Yijian said indifferently and shook his right hand as a sword appeared, very simply thrusting at Yang Junhao. This sword thrust broke through Yang Junhao's concentrated attacks, splitting the sea of fire, and pierced the fire shield. Pa! This shield trembled once and shattered as the blade continued to thrust almost without a pause. And with a pu, Yang Junhao's right shoulder was penetrated. Wen Yijian withdrew his sword and said indifferently, merely so truly disappoints me. Wen Yijian! Wen Yijian! Wen Yijian! The girls who were extremely nervous earlier began to scream, appearing indescribably excited. The men's morale was low, and even more so full of disbelief. One strong as Yang Junhao was defeated in 1 move, then even if Hu Niu or Ling Han took the field, what could even be changed? At the last fight when Hu Niu fought Yang Junhao, it was also a close fight. Although Hu Niu didn't use her terrifying teeth, it still proved Yang Junhao's exceptional strength. Wen Yijian was too strong to the point of making people hopeless. Zhu Xian Air, after exploring the mystery realm, how about returning to East region with me? Wen Yijian asked Zhu Xian Air. Hiss, this guy actually dared to dig Master Ling's people. Everyone was shocked. Seeing Wen Yijian yield at first, they thought he feared Ling Han, but now he openly invited Zhu Xian Air. He completely didn't care about Ling Han at all. Obviously, this guy certainly didn't want to come into a direct conflict with a heaven-grade alchemist, but he wasn't the least bit afraid of one. He certainly couldn't resist a heaven-grade alchemist head-on, but didn't need to be deliberately patient and accommodate him. Clearly, he didn't need Ling Han to refine pills. Austerity followed desirelessness.
This guy was truly hard to see through and was quite cunning. He admitted earlier that he didn't dare to exchange blows with Ling Han, and now if Ling Han flipped out at him, wouldn't that tarnish Ling Han's image as a heaven-grade alchemist? If word got out, everyone would say that a dignified heaven-grade alchemist had no tolerance for others and bullied a spiritual pedestal tier relying on his position. Ling Han's gaze turned cold. He disliked being toyed with in the palm of others.
Niu will beat the heck out of him.
Hu Niu jumped out and blocked Ling Han, walking towards Wen Yijian with her hands behind her back, and said, "Ugly monster, Niu will fight you. If you lose, take this woman away." She turned around and pointed a Zhu Xian heir. Everyone was dumbfounded. Why did losing mean taking away Zhu Xian heir? If so, then they also wanted to lose, wishing they had taken the field earlier. Wan Yijian laughed loudly and took out a stick of sugar-coated ha, handing it to Hu Niu, and said, "Little girl, take it and eat it on the side." Hu Niu began to drool, and snorted. "You think food can tempt Niu? Then why are you drooling?" Wan Yijian laughed and said, "This little girl is quite interesting. Whose kid is it?" Everyone looked at him sympathetically. This little girl's bite was the battle prowess of 20 stars flower blossom tier. Why don't you try? Xiao, Hu Niu leapt out, firing a punch at Wan Yijian. What? Ling Han was slightly shocked. Hu Niu broke through and was at the spiritual pedestal tier. Chapter 461. Punishment. Reverie _ With Ling Han's former life's heaven-tier perception, there were very few people he couldn't see through. Hu Niu was one of them. Unknowingly, this little girl was already in the spiritual pedestal tier. So fast. Wan Yijian only saw a blur before his eyes and Hu Niu's small fist was already in front of him, giving him no chance to parry or dodge. However, he was a genius after all, and with a glare, 2 beams of light fired from his eyes, streaking towards Hu Niu's small hand. Pang. U. P. Dated. By novel full. Calm with a sound, the 2 sword beams hit Hu Niu's fist. The power behind them wasn't small, deflecting Hu Niu's fist and scraping past her cheek. Wan Yijian's combat awareness was extremely strong. He immediately started counterattacking once the danger was resolved. With a finger as sword, he thrusted at Hu Niu. Xiao, Hu Niu's figure flashed, disappearing once again. Wan Yijian cried out, "Not good," in his thoughts. As expected, a wind blew against the back of his head as Hu Niu's fired another punch. He hurriedly leaned forward, but all the black hair on his head was raised, as if turning into swords that stung at Hu Niu. Pang, as the punch hit, several hundred strands of Wan Yijian's hair instantly snapped, but traces of blood emerged on Hu Niu's small hand from being stabbed by the hair swords. Hu Niu's infuriated, firing her small fists repeatedly. Wan Yijian controlled the hair swords to resist as he turned and was finally face-to-face with Hu Niu. Pointing with a finger, instantly 9 flashes of sword chi winnowed and martial intent spread, emitting a terrifying coercive presence. At this moment, he was like an emperor of the path of the sword, no one daring to look directly at him. Hu Niu, however, was unafraid, turning her fist into claws and waving at those attacks of sword chi. Pu, pu, the sword chi was all destroyed, but Hu Niu's attacks were also to no avail. The few exchanges between the two were extremely fast, just like flashes of electricity, each move and style extremely critical. If either of them made a slight mistake, they would receive a heavy injury. A hush fell over the crowd. Even everyone's breathing was involuntarily held back. Only after a good while could the sounds of long rough and long breathing be heard. Everyone was shocked inside. So it turned out these 2 people were strong to such a degree. No matter who else took the field, faced with Hu Niu's attacks, they'd definitely be hit, and in Hu Niu's position, faced with Wan Yijian's counterattacks, they'd definitely suffer ruthless aftershock. However, the 2 tied truly frightening. Wan Yijian's was staring wide-eyed. This little girl was so young and she could already rival him. If they were the same age, then wouldn't Hu Niu only need one hand to suppress him? Hu Niu's viciousness erupted as she kept attacking continuously. Her petite figure leapt like lightning, making Wan Yijian weary with parrying. However, he was certainly strong even under such circumstances. He still had power to return attacks, creating quite a bit of pressure for Hu Niu. Ling Han was shocked as it was his first time seeing Hu Niu fight so strenuously.
It was not that Hu Niu didn't think of using her terrifying teeth to decide the victory with one attack, but that she had no chance unleash an attack so closely. Wen Yijian's battle prowess was also not to be underestimated. If Hu Niu were to bite on Wen Yijian, she would definitely be struck by Wen Yijian's sword qi. The result of that would truly be hard to tell. Humph! Hu Niu stopped. She had the absolute initiative, and the sugar-coated ha that was originally in Wen Yijian's hand was snatched by her. At this moment, she peeled the sugar coating and began eating it deliciously. Ugly monster, you can take this ugly woman away. Hee, truly interesting. The first of the prodigy role, Yang Junhao, was actually defeated in one move, but the third-ranked Hu Niu could suppress Wen Yijian. Wonder if Yang Junhao's gone red yet. Everyone discussed spiritedly. Hu Niu didn't disappoint them as expected. The stronger the opponent, the stronger she was, at last saving the face of North Region's martial arts. Although there were many people who could suppress Wen Yijian at the scene, but if a flower blossom tier warrior intervened, wouldn't that truly be saying that there was no one else in the North region? If this flower blossom tier martial artist was of the young generation, then it wouldn't be a problem, proving the strength of North region's martial arts. But, if only one from the older generation could suppress him, then it would truly be humiliating. Ling Han looked at Zhu Xian'er and said, "Follow me." The two entered the already set-up tent, which blocked the crowd's gaze, making the crowd feel itch on the inside. A man and a woman alone, would they do something embarrassing? The tent was large, not only having chairs and tables, but also beds. No one lacked a spatial ring and could bring all they wanted. Ling Han sat down and said, "When did I become your master?" Zhu Xian'er slowly fell to her knees and said, "Xian'er wants to do some things for Master Han." Ling Han laughed and said, "Being a maid-servant at a tavern and following by my side, that's doing things for me. Please instruct me, Master Han, Xian'er will definitely try hard," Zhu Xian'er said seriously. Ling Han rolled his eyes. Since when did this girl become endearingly silly? He shook his head and said, "This doesn't feel good." He pointed at the table and said, "Go lie over there." Zhu Xian'er's pretty face turned red and then white. Did this guy's lust erupt, wanting to take her over here? She hurriedly said, "Master Ling, don't misunderstand, Xian'er truly wants to work for you." "I didn't misunderstand, you misunderstood." Ling Han took out a rattan. "I dislike those who don't listen the most, so I'm going to beat you." Zhu Xian'er walked over obediently to the side of the table, prostrating and sticking up her butt. She couldn't help but blush in this position, so embarrassing. Ling Han laughed mischievously. After this whipping, this girl wouldn't bother him anymore, right? "Pa," he unhesitatingly lashed out, emitting a crisp sound, but this was only a normal rattan, so how could it possibly hurt Zhu Xian'er, who was a spiritual pedestal tier? Pa, sounds were ceaseless. Zhu Xian'er's pretty face was getting more red and hot. She seemed to have understood something and couldn't help but blush. She could imagine how she looked right now. Her pert buttocks should be facing Ling Han, right? Too embarrassing. Too shameful. Her consciousness was somewhat blurry, and she felt that her face was shockingly hot, as if it were about to burn. A feeling never felt before breeding within, sprawling and rising. Just when she was in a daze, she heard Hu Niu say, "Ling Han, you're hitting too lightly, let Niu help you." Before she came back to her senses, her butt felt an unbearable pain, making her cry out involuntarily. She turned around abruptly and saw that Hu Niu was biting down on her butt. Chapter 462. Entering the Mystery Realm. Reverie _ What's going on? What's going on? Outside, the crowd was extremely impatient, jumping up and down and almost going crazy. They heard pa sounds earlier, and now this rapturous scream. What exactly was going on inside? It was impossible not to think wrongly. If it weren't for the fear of a heaven-grade alchemist's power and influence, someone would definitely have charged into the tent to see what was happening. After a while the tent was opened, and Zhu Xian'er walked out, but without taking 2 steps, she reached towards her petite but as if it was hurt. And watching her gait, it was clearly somewhat limp. It was over. Their goddess had been defiled. Beast. Ling Han felt it strange. The 12 Skies mystery realm was a mystery realm that belonged to the North region, so why did a genius from the East region come?
As the time approached day by the day, more and more people came to the mountain valley.
For example, the Winter Moon sect, the Beast Emperor sect, and the like came in groups 1 by 1, 10 people at a time. A great sect like the Winter Moon sect possessed several dozen entry quotas, and sects that were slightly lesser like the Great Sorrow sect and the Cold Water sect had a few to a dozen quotas. However, only these sects were qualified to receive entries, or either Leviathans like the Alchemist Society and Spirit Treasures Pavilion. However, the Alchemist Society didn't care at all, and the Spirit Treasures Pavilion gifted it to those on the Prodigy roll. When the Winter Moon sect arrived, Ling Han saw Feng Yan. After 1 year, Feng Yan also advanced to the spiritual pedestal tier, even reaching the second layer. His advancement speed was somewhat shocking. It seemed his bloodline had already completely developed. Wild strength berserk apes were shattering void tier beings in the ancient times, and when the bloodline was awakened, it had great benefits on improving martial arts. Additionally, he also had a spiritual infant tier teacher who could bring him endless resources. Before the flower blossom tier, it was acceptable no matter how fast one's progression was, but if it was still so after the flower blossom tier, then it would truly be frightening. Feng Yan also saw Ling Han and revealed a complicated look, but it immediately turned resolute, with blistering killing intent. He obviously knew Ling Han had become a heaven-grade alchemist, and normally speaking, he would never have a chance for revenge in this lifetime. However, Ling Han rose too abruptly and hadn't gathered the power that heaven-grade alchemists should have, so he still had a chance. Secretly killing Ling Han, especially in a mystery realm, who would know? This guy actually didn't attend the Prodigy battle. Ling Han nodded inwardly and guessed that Feng Yan was at a key stage in cultivation, probably breaking through to the spiritual pedestal tier, the reason why he didn't make it in time. Everyone came to pay respects to Ling Han, who was a dignified heaven-grade alchemist and could be said to be the figure with the highest status in the North region at the moment. Even if the masters of the 3 greatest sects of the valley came, they would have to be respectful in front of Ling Han. However, this was North region, and the strongest were warriors of the spiritual infant tier. Even stronger elites couldn't come over without difficulty. Thus, for spiritual infant tier warriors, whether Ling Han was a heaven-grade alchemist or an earth-grade one really had no difference. This was called, when the cat was away, the mice would play in North region was so. Spiritual infant tier warriors were the strongest in martial arts, just like shattering void tiers in the middle state, so they naturally didn't need to fear a heaven-grade alchemist. After an entire month's time, everyone entered the valley one after another. The major forces in the North region jointly controlled this mystery realm, and no one could enter without an entry quota issued by them. On the way, Ling Han took Guang Yuan and Li Xichan on another path. When the time came, he would store the two inside the Black Tower and enter the mystery realm using the secret key. However, he didn't want to be target for all. The inheritance of the 12 palaces was too overwhelming. Even Flower Blossom and spiritual infant tier cultivators would extend their hands while disregarding his heaven-grade tier alchemist identity. Moreover, contending over opportunities inside a historic site, no one had to give anyone face, and at the worst they could just kill him. And if they could do away with witnesses, so what if they did? This time there were certainly Flower Blossom tier warriors that entered, like Ao Feng of the Winter Moon sect. Flower Blossom tier elites that weren't 50 years of age could definitely be considered young, conforming with the entry conditions of the 12 heaven mystery realms. Moreover, the Beast Emperor sect, the Blood Flame Valley, and so on also had such geniuses who were highly ranked on the Prodigy roll 20 years ago. Therefore, Flower Blossom tier warriors. Or else it was quite normal to break through in the 80s. With Flower Blossom tier competitors around, Ling Han decided to be more low-key. Lu Yutong, Ken Yi, and the others took one path and dragged Zhu Xianer along, heading to the bottom of the valley where the mystery realm's entrance was, whereas Ling Han came to a thick forest inside the valley with Guang Yuan and Li Xichan, and seeing there was no one in the surroundings, he stored the two inside the Black Tower and took out the key of the Sagittarius Palace. Wang. The key immediately lit up as if it established a connection to a type of power in the mountain valley. Wang. A flash of brilliance wrapped around him, as his figure immediately disappeared. When he reappeared again, he was in an unfamiliar place. It was a barren land with round rocks everywhere, a field of gray. Is this a small world? Ling Han looked afar. In the ancient times, there were mighty cultivators who could separate a city, and even a greater place from the world, overlapping with the current world and forming a mystery land of very miraculous feat. Such heaven-defying handiwork, Ling Han definitely couldn't do it in his previous lifetime.
Just as he was about to let Guang Yuan and Li Xichan out, he was startled, because not far from him, someone was teleported inside. People were randomly teleported after entering the mystery realm, appearing in different places. That was a very fine beauty, her skin white and sparkling as if it was a high-grade jade. She was tall with long legs and her bosom ample, extremely captivating. She was obviously somewhat at a loss, but very soon composed herself, and at the same time, she discovered Ling Han, revealing a vigilant expression. Fighting over treasures in mystery realms, everyone was a hidden enemy. So what if it was a heaven-grade alchemist? In here, the most important thing was to protect oneself. The spiritual qi here was really abundant. Updated by Box Novel. Com. Ling Han retracted his gaze. After he advanced into the spiritual pedestal tier, each spiritual pedestal layer constructed consumed endless origin power, so even for him, his cultivation progression speed now dropped to 3 months for increasing one layer. This actually wasn't slow. After 2 years, he would be past the spiritual pedestal tier. His base was so solid, and being invincible in the same tier, there naturally was a price to pay. However, cultivating in here, he only needed 2 months to increase by 1 layer. Unfortunately, 12 Heaven Mystery Realms only opened for a few months at a time. Chapter 463. Rock Spirit. Reverie _ This was a golem. It shrunk its body earlier, as if an inanimate stone, but now it suddenly rioted, smashing a delicate flower-like beauty into pulp. The scene was a somewhat tragic. The golem wasn't huge, only a meter or so tall. Its head and limbs wormed out of its jagged body, which were also made of accumulated by pieces of rocks. Rock Spirit, Ling Han said lightly. Heaven and earth had spiritual power that could birth all kinds of living creatures, and several of which weren't completely made of flesh and blood. For example, Ents, a race that was formed after plants possessed wisdom. For example, Strange Fire, another type of living creature that, at its pinnacle, could turn into the shape of a human, such that even normal martial artists wouldn't be able to tell it was different from a true human. The one he faced now was a rock spirit. The living spirits of the 5 elements had some things in common. They felt no pain like normal living creatures and were very, very hard to kill. Strange Fire didn't have a physical body and couldn't be hurt by gravity. Only water-type arts could restrain it. The special trait of a rock spirit was its scary defensive power, like Ling Han's rock cliff body. Although it was incomparable to rare metals of the same tier, it was still extremely tough. After mushing the girl, the rock spirit turned to face Ling Han. Despite having no facial features, it still gave Ling Han a feeling of being stared at. This place may be a holy land for cultivation, but it's also a dangerous place. Ling Han muttered. However, if I can subdue a few rock spirits, then I could spread beans into soldiers, surely enough to give people a great surprise. The 1,000 Corpse sect thirsted for the spatial spirit tool in his hand that could accommodate living things for the purpose of hiding a large army inside. When they launched in surprise attack, the effect of it would definitely be shocking. In the time he was lost in thought, the golem charged over and fired a punch, momentous and heavy, breaking through the speed of sound. A visible void instantly formed behind the fist, with chaotic burst of the sonic boom. Ling Han laughed, also greeting with a punch, and said, "Think I'm scared of you, let's see whose fist is harder." Pang! The 2 fists clashed as a shock wave instantly burst forth. The golem was sent flying, its right arm shattered. Ling Han was astounded. He didn't hold back in this punch, simply not using arts or fist chi, but it only shattered one of the golem's arm yet not made the golem explode completely. It could be seen how powerful the golem was and how tough its physique was. Against the golem, there was no need to hold back. Because the golem's shattered arm turned into infinitely small rocks that fell on the ground, but immediately began rolling as if it had its own life. When the rocks gathered underneath the golem's feet, the rocks fluttered and connected to the severed arm. In an instant, the golem's arm returned to how it was. Strange Fire didn't have a physical body and wasn't hurt by brute force. On the other hand, the golem had a tough physique on top of its terrifying recovery power. The golem's head opened, as if cracking open a large mouth, unleashing a furious roar. It had never suffered such a great loss, having its arm shattered by someone else. Tang, 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 it charged at Ling Han in large strides, and with each step,
the ground trembled slightly, showing its terrifying mass. It fired another punch. "Can't beat you into submission?" Ling Han smiled and also fired a punch. Pang! The golem's right arm was shattered again, and this time, Ling Han didn't wait for it to recover, charging up and firing a flurry of punches. The golem's body was very hard, not much different from rare metals of the same tier, but it still couldn't be mentioned in the same breath after all. Otherwise, it'd be Iron Man and not Golem. The rock spirit was somewhat lacking in defense when compared with the gold spirit, but its recovery power was strong. After receiving a dozen punches, the golem was completely shattered into bits and pieces, spreading all over the ground. However, these small pieces of rock immediately began rolling and recombining. Ling Han didn't stop it, but when it was about to finish reconstructing, he fired a punch and shattered it into bits and pieces again. The golem began to reconstruct, but every time it was about to finish, Ling Han would break it up. After 5 consecutive times, it finally stopped reconstructing, and the several hundred pieces of shattered rocks began to wriggle one after another, turning into several hundred small golems. These golems synchronized and roared in anger. Instantly, the pieces of rocks that lay on the desolate field all stood up. They were all golems. SHT. Ling Han was somewhat surprised that he actually landed in the den of golems. Was this luck extremely terrible or extremely good? All the golems roared towards the sky, echoing one another. Ha ha! Ling Han laughed loudly. With this many golems, he could organize a powerful army. He waved his hand and said, "Quickly come into the bowl." Pang, pang, pang. There were at least 100 large golems charging towards Ling Han, and the shattered golem took advantage to reconstruct. The life force and recovery power of these type of spirits were truly a bit overbearing. Ling Han greeted them by firing punches wildly at these golems. His battle prowess was too terrifying, sending a golem flying with each punch, but these golems were unharmed, immediately charging right back. Hard to take care of. Just the right time to polish his fist techniques. Ling Han launched the War Elephant Fist, and 7 flashes of momentous chi surged, evolving into 8 ancient war elephants that rammed into those golems. He pulled no punches as his battle prowess immediately rocketed and the war elephants dominated, crushing into pieces any golem that was touched. However, this only suppressed the golems and couldn't destroy the golem's strong recovery power. They still reconstructed, entering the fray again. Ling Han considered storing them into the Black Tower, but every golem had its own consciousness. It would be the same after shattering their consciousness, be unable to store them in the Black Tower no matter what. It seemed like they needed a taste of power before they learned a lesson. Ling Han unleashed the Demon Birth Sword. With the destructive power of a 10th tier spirit tool, would these golems still be able to recover after a strike of the sword? Once Demon Birth Sword was unleashed, the 10th tier spirit tool's vicious presence overflowed the area instantly. The golems lost some of their viciousness, beginning to hesitate. They were extremely vicious and merciless a moment ago, having no scruples at all, but now. "Haha, you guys also know fear?" Ling Han said, laughing. However, these golems were naturally vicious after all. They immediately regained their vicious attitude, rushing towards Ling Han. Ling Han swung Demon Birth Sword, and instantly 9 flashes of sword chi surged, sweeping towards those golems. The golems weren't highly intelligent, but they had instincts. Each one of them avoided the Demon Birth Sword's blade. However, they couldn't completely avoid the sword chi. Pu. Many golems were instantly struck by the sword chi and sliced into 2. This time, the golems reconstructed much slower. The sword chi was slashed out by a 10th tier spirit tool, possessing terrifying destructive power. Even with the golem's recovery speed, they couldn't reconstruct immediately. Ling Han suppressed all the golems once again with his own might, showing his invincibility in the spiritual pedestal tier. These golems retreated one after another and gathered together, piling up into a human pyramid. Seeing these golems continuously drilling into each other's bodies, Ling Han couldn't help but be astounded, blurting out, "Could it be that these golems were all broken up from a huge golem?" Chapter 464. The 10th Flash of Sword Chi. Reverie _ All the golems weren't very tall, about 1 meter or so, round and even a bit charmingly naive. However, they piled together and reached 10 meters height now. The massive physique no longer had any charm but was instead filled with coercive power. In an instant, the massive golem finished its reconstruction, firing a punch at Ling Han. Pa 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 pa, the speed of the fist was too fast, tearing open the air and forming ripples as the sonic boom sounded repeatedly. An intense fighting spirit arose within Ling Han as he laughed loudly and said, "Come, come, come, let us fight 3,000 rounds." He greeted with a punch. Pang! Two fists greatly different in size collided and emitted an earth-shakingly loud sound, instantly forming a shockwave that pushed forward in all directions. A mushroom cloud rose up from where the two were standing, rising up to several thousand meters high, and dust filled the air. It went to show the power of this clash. Half of Ling Han sunk into the mud, and on the massive golem's fist were several cracks, which were being repaired at an extremely fast speed. In this punch, the massive golem's power took the upper hand, whereas Ling Han was superior as far as hardness of fists was concerned. Ling Han nodded inwardly. The massive golem didn't break past the threshold of the flower blossom tier, but the several hundred golems all had the power of the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. How terrifying was it with all their power stacked together? If it weren't for the massive gap between the flower blossom tier and the spiritual pedestal tier, as a spiritual ocean tier, the golem's power would have long broken through the threshold of the spiritual pedestal tier. Ling Han raised his leg and walked out from the mud. At this time, the massive golem fired another punch, but this time, the fist was wrapped in a gray brilliance, appearing somewhat worrisome. Martial intent? Ling Han muttered. But could the spirit of the 5 elements cultivate like normal living beings? It was obviously impossible. This should be an inborn ability, just like strange fire possessing terrifying temperature, burning all things. Ling Han circulated origin power and fired War Elephant Fist, battling the massive golem head-on. Hong, hong, hong. The two weren't in the flower blossom tier, but their battle prowess broke through the theoretical limit of the spiritual pedestal tier and could be called half-step flower blossom tier. Thus, their battle was also extremely fierce, and as the fists collided, their combined destructive power was shocking. Fortunately, this was wilderness, allowing them to battle to their heart's content. And Ling Han did. No spiritual pedestal tier warrior could possibly let him be so unbridled, and when encountering a flower blossom tier opponent, he would have to constantly think about how to stay alive and wouldn't be able to put all his spirit into the battle. Now it was different since this was truly an evenly matched battle. The massive golem's power was even slightly stronger than his, boasting even more surprising recovery power, allowing Ling Han to attack as much as he liked without having worry about killing his sparring partner because of using too much force. Hong as he threw a punch. 7 flashes of fist chi were fired out. Haha, as expected, battles are the most direct and the fastest way to increase martial arts comprehension. Ling Han laughed loudly. But on second thought, it would be too wasteful to use such a rare opponent to polish fist techniques. Watch the sword. He unleashed the demon birth sword again and struck towards the massive golem. His grasp of the way of the sword was obviously higher than the fists, and compounded with a 10th tier spirit tool, the power was naturally even fiercer. Originally, the two were evenly matched, with Ling Han being behind ever so slightly, but now he immediately turned the tables, gaining quite an advantage. It was at least a 7-3 situation, and Ling Han held the 7. The massive golem let out a roar. If it were struck by sword chi, its recovery speed would slow down by 1-fold, and if it were sliced by the demon birth sword directly, then the recovery would slow down by 10-fold. The rock spirit probably didn't fear bodily pains, but no matter if it was demon birth sword or sword chi, both contained martial intent, which could be used to make assaults on the divine sense terrifying, making the massive golem immensely pained. If it had no divine sense, how could it be a living spirit? And if it had no divine sense, Ling Han would have long stored this guy in the Black Tower. However, the massive golem was truly tough and battled Ling Han non-stop even though it was clearly at a disadvantage, exposing its viciousness. It suddenly opened its mouth to roar, and a sound wave swatted at Ling Han like a tsunami. This was a large-scale attack, so Ling Han couldn't dodge and could only take it head-on. Pooh! Ling Han groaned as blood oozed out from his nose and ears. The impact dug right into his body, affecting his relatively soft organs and brain, almost making him collapse right away. Oh man, if this were any other spiritual pedestal tier warrior, Even one at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, they would have been heavily injured from that roar, possibly even imploding and dying.
You also have an ultimate move, huh? Ling Han laughed loudly, his fighting spirit soaring. If the golem was easily taken care of, then there wouldn't be much point in fighting. He charged up, swinging demon birth sword and raising up endless winds and clouds. The two continued to lash out at each other. Ling Han's released his fighting spirit to his heart's content, and although there were quite a few injuries on his body, he felt extremely at ease, as if something was about to rush out from his body. He knew that it was the 10th flash of sword chi. From 9 to 10 was a fundamental change. The 10th flash of sword chi could condense into sword ray, so it was also exceptionally hard to cultivate. However, Ling Han forgot about the 10th flash of sword chi, and about sword ray as well, only wishing to battle to his heart's content. This secretly coincided with the way of the heavens. Intentional pursuit simply equaled more haste and less speed. His action through inaction, following his heart, was the best path. He struck with his sword, and after 9 flashes of sword chi were fired out, a new flash of sword chi emerged. Although it was only a foot long, and disappeared on its own once it was fired, it was still a real 10th flash of sword chi. Ha ha! Ling Han felt even more satisfied, swinging demon birth sword. The 10th flash of sword chi soon stabilized and joined the other 9 flashes, bursting forth the power it should have. This was a fundamental change. From this point on, Ling Han could finally be called a true king amongst martial artists. Ling Han's battle prowess rose steeply and instantly suppressed the massive golems completely, striking the powerful rock spirit into continuous retreat without a chance of retaliation. The massive golem used his old trick and roared violently again, wanting to shock Ling Han with the sound waves. Break! Ling Han's eyes lit up. The demon birth sword struck as 10 flashes of sword chi flew out. Pu, 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 the sound waves stormed over, but he sliced them into bits. The remaining waves were split into 2 and swept by his side, no longer being able to hurt him. Ha ha ha, the 10th flash of sword chi is powerful as expected. Ling Han laughed loudly, bold and unconstrained. The massive golem stopped its attacks, staring at Ling Han from afar. Not going to fight anymore? Gonna admit defeat? Ling Han said smilingly. He was suddenly startled, for he saw the massive golem's body undulate like it wasn't a golem, but something made of water. It was extremely fierce, and what came after was its presence, which was advancing in an extremely powerful direction. This golem is about to advance. Chapter 465. Rock Spirit Advances. Reverie _ Hey, no way. Is it really good to play this way? Ling Han sighed. He'd finally had the complete advantage and cultivated out the 10th flash of sword Kyle was perfect. But suddenly his opponent cheated, and no longer fought him on the same tier, rising to the flower blossom tier. How could he handle this? Ling Han was very freakish, currently only at the 1st layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, but his battle prowess was already halfway into the flower blossom tier. Even if he advanced into the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, his battle prowess would merely become just a stronger halfway into the flower blossom tier. How could the boundary of mortals be so easily surpassed? Even Rain Emperor relied on the power of the nation to forcefully push halfway into the flower blossom tier level strength to the full flower blossom tier. The power of the nation. Just how many people and martial artists did Rain Country have? Earlier, when the massive golem split into infinite small golems, it lay on the ground like an inanimate stone, probably absorbing the power of the earth and making its final efforts in breaking through to the flower blossom tier. Therefore, when he and the girl came, the golem was immediately alarmed because it was in the middle of a crucial period. The girl didn't notice and stepped on the rock, naturally making the golem feel danger and offhandedly smacking her to death. If someone were to poke the nose of a martial artist cultivating in seclusion, wouldn't the martial artist be infuriated to the point of wanting to kill someone? Currently, the massive golem couldn't beat Ling Han, and could only forcefully begin its breakthrough. Once it advanced into the flower blossom tier, killing Ling Han would be as easy as the turn of a palm. This wasn't just about revenge, but also its survival. It had to take the chance. Ling Han wanted to stop the golem from taking this step, but after a bit of thought, he gave up on this thought. He intended to subdue this massive golem, so the stronger it was, the better. The golem could cheat, but so could he.
Small tower, can you intervene?
Ling Han asked.
This was a mystery realm and was its own small world. Small tower immediately said, although this is a small world and I've absorbed some source power, it's still not enough to conceal the power fluctuations when intervening.
Ling Han was instantly disappointed. After all that, small tower still couldn't be used. It seemed like he could only stop the massive golem from breaking through or turn around to run. However, if the black tower was unleashed and if its power isn't used, I can still suppress such presence fluctuations, small tower continued.
Oh!
Ling Han was moved. If the black tower was unleashed and the massive golem was lured in, then inside the black tower, wouldn't this golem have to listen obediently even if it was a shattering void tier creature, let alone a flower blossom tier 1? He immediately made up his mind, allowing the massive golem to break through, thereby subduing a flower blossom tier rock spirit. Spirits of the 5 elements, each one possessed unusual abilities. The strange fire could support him in pill refinement, the rock spirit could nourish the land, the gold spirit could make weapons sharper and tougher, the wood spirit was the source of life and had surprising effects of healing, the water spirit could summon clouds and winds, relieving droughts. Ling Han waited silently for the massive golem's breakthrough. Since there was nothing to do, he summoned Guang Yuan and Li Si Chan out of the Black Tower and the three began cultivating together. The spiritual qi was too dense in here, forming spirit qi like mist. Cultivating 1 day could equal cultivating 10 days on the outside. Ling Han and Guang Yuan were martial arts maniacs and immediately went in the zone. Though Li Si Chan focused on pill refining, it was necessary to cultivate. She didn't have a strange fire, and the level of alchemy was restricted by martial arts. Therefore, she very soon began to cultivate as well. They all took a medicinal pill supportive to cultivation, furthering the cultivation speed. Only when they used up their soul power did they stop, and at this time the massive golem was still breaking through. Rocks broke into pieces all over its body as its body was actually shrinking. Ling Han could clearly see that it wasn't that the massive golem failed, but conversely, the golem was walking down the path firmly. Flower blossom tier creatures transcended the mortal body, and for the rock spirit, it was the same. It condensed the essence within its body and cast off useless rocks, developing towards a higher level of life.
What's that large guy?
Li Si Chan finally had the time to ask. Rock spirit, a rare rock of the world that attained wisdom and turned into a living being, Ling Han said simplistically. It seems to be undergoing some sort of change, Guang Yuan said.
Yes.
Ling Han nodded. It's charging into the flower blossom tier. I'm waiting for it to successfully break through, and then to subdue it.
Pooh!
Guang Yuan and Li Si Chan spurted out at the same time, feeling that Ling Han had gone crazy. The flower blossom tier. Weren't those 3 words enough? Below the flower blossom tier, all were powerless ants, and no matter how freakish Ling Han was, he couldn't possibly compare with a flower blossom tier being. Unless he rose to the throne, allocating the power of the nation like the Rain Emperor did. Would the rock spirit show mercy because he was a heaven-grade alchemist? Obviously not.
Young Master Han?
Guang Yuan and Li Si Chan looked nervous all across their faces.
No matter.
Ling Han smiled slightly. He possessed the Black Tower, which was his greatest trump card. Guang Yuan and Li Si Chan obviously thought of it. Although they didn't know what exactly the Black Tower was, they simply knew that Ling Han could hide in that place of absolute safety in a desperate situation. After they finished cultivating, Guang Yuan and Li Si Chan returned to the Black Tower. The massive golem could finish its breakthrough at any time, so they didn't want to be flustered when that time came. As expected, after another 2 hours passed, the massive golem suddenly let out an explosive roar. The sound wave soared into the sky, ripping into the clouds with terrifyingly shocking momentum. Its height shrunk to a little over 30 centimeters, but it was still much taller than normal people. However, compared to its previous height of 10 feet, it could be called a shrunken version. The flower blossom tier. This rock spirit already cast off its mortal body and advanced into the tier that all living beings dreamed of. It was different, completely different. This massive golem's presence was like the ocean and a pattern appeared on its torso. It seemed like a character, and also a bit like a pattern, impossible to differentiate. It was old and rustic, as if an ancient language that existed in the primitive times. The massive golem looked at Ling Han in a lofty manner. Although it didn't evolve eyes, its feet slowly left the ground, floating in midair. The flower blossom tier beings could fly. A chubby golem floating in midair. This scene was a bit funny. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "Blockhead, come hit me." At the same time, he sent a thought to Small Tower. "You can begin." Small Tower didn't respond and just directly unleashed the Black Tower. Wang! A pitch-black tower appeared, only a few meters big at first, but it immediately enlarged, reaching several hundred meters in size. A door opened at the bottom and revealed an indistinct entrance. Looking from outside was a blur of chaos, nothing could be clearly seen. The Black Tower was extremely plain, neither having the gold words of indestructible golden scroll floating, nor raising an ancient and primitive presence. It was ordinary as ordinary could be. Ling Han knew that Small Tower controlled the circulation of Black Tower's presence, or else if it leaked out, it would attract the attention of powerful beings from the higher realm, directly breaking into this realm to seize the Black Tower. "Blockhead, come into the bowl. Come into the tower." Chapter 466. Subduing the Rock Spirit. Reverie _ The massive golem went berserk. A puny being of the human race actually dared to provoke it time and time again? Especially when it had advanced to the flower blossom tier, which was an increase on the level of life, surpassing Ling Han by countless times. If its intelligence was normal, then it would definitely have scruples about the Black Tower that suddenly appeared. However, the rock spirit acted based on instincts. It instinctively felt that the Black Tower was quite ordinary, so what did it have to fear? Xiao! It immediately soared through the sky as a terrifying presence swirled by. Even the ground was trembling. Ling Han's face turned pale and his skin rippled. This wasn't as simple as mental oppression. The flower blossom tier presence could be physicalized, especially the special type like the rock spirit, birthed by heaven and earth. The oppressive power of it was too strong. Ling Han slowly retreated, arriving at the Black Tower's entrance. Ang! The massive golem soared over. With one punch, it was going to crush the human who dared to shatter its head and hands repeatedly. Ling Han retreated once more, and Xiao, his entire person, entered the Black Tower. The massive golem didn't hesitate and charged right in. Seeing that Ling Han wasn't far from it, its viciousness instantly erupted. It launched itself over, throwing a punch onto the top of Ling Han's head. It wanted to smash Ling Han into pulp. "Freeze!" Ling Han said lightly, and the massive golem's movements suddenly stopped. In the Black Tower, he was the dictator. At this time, Small Tower already turned Black Tower into a microscopic seed. Even unleashing the Black Tower and controlling the leaking of the presence was a burden for Small Tower. It would consume source power, which it naturally didn't want to waste. The massive golem was a bit baffled. Why could it suddenly not move? Its intelligence apparently wasn't enough to figure it out as it shook its head abruptly, as if racking its brains. Ling Han laughed loudly and swiped his finger, and the massive golem immediately turned upside down. Ang! The massive golem opened its mouth to roar and a sound wave instantly stormed over. "Freeze again!" Ling Han said lightly, and the sound wave stopped abruptly, freezing in midair as if time could be stopped. He walked over and casually kneaded the curved sound wave into a ball, and then pressed towards the massive golem. Pong! The sound wave's power erupted and instantly sent the golem flying, even blowing a dent in the massive being's chest. Now that the golem advanced into the flower blossom tier, the power of the sound waves it released naturally increased, and it was also kneaded together, exploding on one point, which was even scarier. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "Blockhead, you convinced yet?" The massive golem got up. The shattered rocks immediately flew towards its chest as if it was made of water, quickly recovering to as it was. Not even an injury could be seen. It stared fiercely at Ling Han, and Xiao launched itself once again, attacking towards Ling Han. Ling Han casually moved his fingers. This powerful opponent who could put up a fight against him at the spiritual pedestal tier had no power to retaliate at all, even though it advanced into the flower blossom tier. The massive golem was truly tough as nails. No matter how Ling Han tormented it, shattering it into thousands of pieces and stopping it from recovering, it wouldn't surrender. Every time Ling Han released it, it would attack at Ling Han fiercely. Ling Han couldn't help but lose his patience. Just how long would this continue for? Let me.
Small tower appeared and swayed gently. Pa! A scene that made Ling Han's eyes drop out appeared. The massive golem actually knelt down facing the small tower. It was clearly a golem, but Ling Han actually saw the sincerity on its face. What the heck? If he'd known small tower was so kick-asteriskous, he'd have let it take the matter. Ling Han knew that a being birthed by the earth like the rock spirit had absolutely no fear of death, and for them, death was only returning to heaven and earth. They were proud because they were birthed by heaven and earth, standing high above and looking down on the masses. So no matter how Ling Han suppressed it, it would only incite the anger and unyieldingness of the rock spirit. However, Small Tower's level of life was far beyond the rock spirit's, as if born a king, so the rock spirit could only kneel upon seeing Small Tower. Small Tower trembled slightly and emitted wave after wave, while the rock spirit nodded repeatedly, as if the two were communicating. After a while, the massive golem got up and walked obediently to Ling Han's side, rubbing Ling Han's shoulder with its head like a dog. The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched. The wild and intractable large fellow earlier was obedient like a dog right now, making him somewhat unable to accept it. Master. The golem telepathically sent a divine sense message. The rock spirit was the same as the fire spirit, unable to open its mouth to speak. But they didn't need to, since they could inherently use telepathic thoughts, crossing the language barrier. Ling Han laughed and said to Small Tower, "What did you say to it that made it so obedient?" "I told it that you're my master, so naturally it's master too," Small Tower said indifferently. "That easy?" Ling Han sighed with all sorts of feelings. Black Tower was too kick-asteriskous, subduing a flower blossom tier rock spirit that easily. If it were someone else, even if a shattering void tier warrior came, it would be useless. At most they could smash the rock spirit into bits and pieces, but not subdue it. Master hungry, eat stones. The massive golem sent Ling Han another thought. Crap, why'd he get another chow hound? Ling Han palmed his forehead. This big fellow shouldn't be as gluttonous as Hunyo, and should be like strange fire. Eating was a necessity to strengthen itself. Strange fires could devour other strange fires to advance itself, while rock spirits devoured other rock spirits. He immediately thought of Heavenly Luck Stone, which was also a rare stone birthed by heaven and earth, but he hurriedly shook his head. This thing could foster a genius, and giving it to the rock spirit to devour would be too much of a waste. There were many rare stones in the world. Ling Han nodded and said, "Follow a boss like me, there'll definitely be rocks." The massive golem smiled simple-mindedly, foolish like a rash fellow. Ling Han looked at the golem and suddenly had an idea. He hurriedly said, "You can change your body as you wish." "Oh right, first I'll have to give you a name. There's already Small Tower and Small Fire. You'll be called Small Rock." The massive golem naturally wouldn't be against it, simply nodding its head and sending a thought of approval. Ling Han had it raise 36 pillars on top of its head. They were very short, only the length of a finger. The massive golem didn't know why, but simply did so obediently without asking. It was as if it had suddenly grown hair. It works. Ling Han sent it another thought, having it change the locations of the pillars, and forming a mysterious pattern. It wasn't that Ling Han was doing it for fun. Earlier, he suddenly thought that since the rock spirit's body was extremely solid, only a bit inferior to rare metals of the same tier, would it work if he carved the Heavenly Thunder Dipper formation on it? This was an endeavor, and if it worked, he would carve 6th tier formations and 7th tier formations on it in the future. Chapter 467. A Special Formation. Reverie _ Ling Han was a man of action, doing what he thought of. He immediately carved formation patterns on the massive golem's hair, and these 36 strands of hair were the formation eyes. It had been quite a few days since he received Tiandu Thunder Star Array. He had long figured out the formation patterns, but lacked the materials to form it. Now a large piece of material was placed in front of him, instantly making him eager to give it a try. He had already carved the formation patterns on rocks earlier, so it was now a piece of cake. After advancing into the spiritual pedestal tier, his divine sense also increased by a whole lot, so he could carve 3 formation patterns in one go now. After resting for 5 to 6 hours,
he could carve 3 more formation patterns. Calculating in this way, he could carve 10 or so formation patterns in a day, and in less than 4 days, he created all 36 formation eyes. Inside the Black Tower, there wasn't the Tao of heaven and earth. Ling Han summoned the massive golem and said, "Unleash formation eyes." Song, song, song. Pillars rose from the top of the massive golem's head, forming a formation, and instantly, the formation patterns lit up and gathered the power of heaven and earth as the entire formation became woven with white lightning. The massive golem fired a punch. Zzz. The flashes of lightning were also fired out. Its prowess was impossible and terrifyingly shocking. Ha 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 ha. Ling Han guffawed, appearing extremely satisfied. This was truly a moving formation. He stroked his chin as he thought of the formation patterns on Yin Hong's body, forming an astounding defensive effect which blocked even Hunyo's attacks. This proved that the human body could also act as formation eyes, and his sudden idea was also inspired by this. I've already cultivated to iron sheet body and the toughness of my physique is comparable to rare metals of the same tier, so I should also be able to tolerate the power of heaven and earth drawn in by the formation patterns. As long as the formations tier doesn't surpass my tier, Ling Han said pensively. If he could carve formation patterns like that of Yin Hong, his defensive power could increase another level. Having stayed here for 4 days, it's time to depart. Ling Han stored the massive golem inside the Black Tower. It was a lot easier to deal with now since the massive golem was loyal to him like a dog, so it naturally wouldn't resist his divine sense. Ling Han advanced with Guang Yuan and Li Si-chan. They actually didn't know where to go, but anyway, they'd move along first. This wasn't a real world. There were clouds covering the skies, there was also the difference of day and night, which was the change of light and dark, but there was neither a sun nor a moon. The 3 walked for a while, and the wilderness was already behind them. A vast plain appeared in front, and the carpet of grasses covered the insteps of their feet. Gentle winds breezed by, making them feel at ease. "Wait," Ling Han suddenly said. He walked forward a few steps and parted the grass with his feet, immediately showing bones with traces of blood. Guang Yuan also walked over. After examining for a while, he said, "This is a human collarbone." Ling Han nodded and said, "It should be of a martial artist who entered, but if the injury was man-made, it wouldn't possibly just leave a piece of bone. Moreover, by the looks of the cracks, it seemed to be forcefully gnawed off by sharp teeth." "Beasts!" the 3 of them concluded at the same time. "Why wasn't there any before?" Li Si-chan was somewhat puzzled. Ling Han pondered then said, "The territory earlier was small rocks, so beasts didn't dare to intrude. From this, it can be confirmed that this beast or beast pack probably doesn't rival small rock." Li Si-chan and Guang Yuan didn't dare to be careless. The rock spirit was at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier before, and only Ling Han could care less about it. One of them was at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, and the other just entered the gushing spring tier, far from the rock spirit's previous power. They continued to advance, and after another stretch of road, a foul wind suddenly swept by. "A beast's den," Ling Han immediately said and leapt out. After a few leaps and landings, he found a barren land on the field of grass and dug a hole. The foul smell came from within. Seeming to hear Ling Han's voice, a beast wormed out of the hole. It was just 3 feet long, dusky all over, and somewhat like a wolf, but its mouth was flat as if a duck's. Flat-mouthed vicious mongoose. Ling Han revealed a smile. The leader of vicious mongooses could have king-tier bloodline, which is greatly tonic. Even a normal vicious mongoose was in the spiritual ocean tier. Breeding it in the Black Tower to eat later on, it would definitely be tasty enough to make one drool. "Si-chan, you go back first," Ling Han said and waved at Li Si-chan, sending her into the Black Tower. "Master Han, then I'll go fight first." Guang Yuan shouted loudly and charged out. Although he was at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, he advanced into the spiritual pedestal tier before and also received Ling Han's pointers. Learning War Elephant Fist, his battle prowess was quite out of the ordinary amongst spiritual ocean tier warriors. However, this was a beast den. Vicious mongoose wormed out one after another, and at least several dozen of them were at the spiritual ocean tier. The last few were at the spiritual pedestal tier and had a special divine light. On their foreheads was a pattern that emitted an ominous glare. Ling Han smiled slightly and said,
Old brother Guang, all the spiritual ocean tier beasts will be up to you, and I'll be responsible for the few spiritual pedestal tier ones. But, don't you kill them, these will be our delicious meals afterwards. Master Han, this request is somewhat high.
Guang Yuan launched attacks while complaining to Ling Han. There were at least 4 vicious mongooses that reached the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier. It was somewhat difficult for him to win, let alone subdue them without hurting them. Ling Han laughed and said, "Can't do it."
"I'll try my best."
Guang Yuan clenched his teeth and raised both fists, attacking the vicious mongooses. The few spiritual pedestal tier vicious mongooses wanted to go up to support, but Ling Han blocked them.
"Your opponent is me,"
Ling Han said smilingly and casually threw a few punches. Pang, pang, pang. These vicious mongoose were beaten down. Within the spiritual pedestal tier, there really were very few existences that could fight against Ling Han. He stored these vicious mongooses inside the Black Tower, then watched the battle between Guang Yuan and the other vicious mongooses.
He was slightly startled, feeling a shred of a dangerous presence, and couldn't help but turn around, noticing an old vicious mongoose wormed out the hole. The edges of its hair had already turned grayish-white, but it emitted a presence that made Ling Han not dare to be careless.
As expected, a king tier. Ling Han's eyes lit up. This was an old vicious mongoose at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. Despite its apparent strength, possessing king tier bloodline made it different. Its battle prowess far surpassed the normal 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. However, it was a king against a king. Ling Han naturally wouldn't be at all frightened, smiling as he said, "Old brother Guang, you're just about to charge into the spiritual pedestal tier once again. This king tier beast just happens to be able to aid you in making this step."
"Much obliged, Master Han."
Guang Yuan was exulted.
Charging into a great tier naturally needed the support of a huge amount of energy, or else one could only accumulate through time and then form an explosive burst, charging through in one go.
However, this took a lot of time, and second, it might not succeed. However, a king tier beast would make it different. The blood and flesh essence were like treasured medicine, and could definitely provide enough energy support. Chapter 468. Bone Patterns. Reverie _. The old vicious mongoose appeared extremely furious. These 2 humans not only snatched its juniors, but also wanted to eat it, truly having no idea of death.
It was a king amongst beasts.
Ling Han didn't want to waste time and exploded with all his strength right away, unleashing the demon birth sword and thrusting it at the old vicious mongoose. The old vicious mongoose was extremely intrepid. A king tier meant standing at the peak of this tier and represented invincibility. The vein-like lines on its forehead lit up as it leapt out extremely quickly, and in a flash appeared before Ling Han's chest, opening its mouth and biting at Ling Han's throat.
"Certainly quite fast."
Ling Han smiled slightly and raised his hand, blocking the old vicious mongoose's sharp teeth. In terms of speed, the old vicious mongoose was fast, but it wasn't at all comparable to Hunyo. With a snap, the old vicious mongoose bit Ling Han's palm, wanting to bite off this human's arm. However, as it bit down, only countless sparks burst forth. It couldn't help but be shocked. Was this guy actually a human? How come his palm was so solid? It clearly didn't feel the fluctuations of origin power, so it was simply the defense of Ling Han's flesh.
What the FCK? Its teeth were even loosened.
Ling Han countered with a punch, and the old vicious mongoose was instantly sent flying. He was slightly startled as he said, "It actually didn't die." As expected of a king tier beast, taking Ling Han's punch right on without dying. The old vicious mongoose burst into anger. What did king tier represent? It was invincible in this tier. And when a king encountered another king, then victory depended on whose tier was higher. Ling Han was only at the 1st layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, while it was 9th tier, obviously having the absolute advantage. However, it lost, which made it extremely out of sorts. Moreover, Ling Han actually wanted to kill it with one punch, feeling sour from not killing it in an instant.
It was regarded with such contempt.
The old vicious mongoose attacked again and opened its mouth, spitting out 9 flashes of air blades that swept towards Ling Han. As expected of a king amongst beasts, cultivating 9 flashes of chi. Ling Han complimented. A king amongst beasts originally had surprising battle prowess, and on top of the chi that only kings amongst martial artists could form,
its battle prowess was naturally even more frightening. Xiao, xiao, xiao. 9 flashes of air blades flew in unison, violently slashing at Ling Han. Each air blade had complex vein-like patterns winnowing, emitting an ancient and grand presence. Ling Han was slightly startled. These vein-like patterns made even him feel nervous, showing that it was no trivial thing. He didn't dare to be careless and pushed out the demon birth sword, greeting the air blades. With a slash of a sword, 9 flashes of sword chi also flew in unison. When the sword chi met the air blades, both were annihilated. Ling Han was shocked again by the terrifying martial intent. The sword chi he used the demon birth sword to fire out only tied with the air blades his opponent spat out. Was this the true strength of a king amongst beasts? Haha, come fight! Ling Han's fighting spirit soared. Earlier, he knew that the old vicious mongoose was a king amongst beasts and was still absent-minded, seeing it as a minion, but after this attack, he finally took it seriously. He waved the sword and used a new sword technique, Thunderfire Sword Technique. This was an earth-grade technique that could only be cultivated at the spiritual pedestal tier, replacing the phasing out 4 seasons sword technique. After so many days, he had already grasped this sword technique proficiently, and as the long sword was swung, sounds of thunderstorm rumbled and raging flames burned. Earth-grade techniques were powerful. Compounded with the sharpness of a 10th-tier spirit tool, Ling Han naturally took the high ground. He gave a long holler and the 10th flash of sword chi shot out, instantly increasing his might sharply. 10 flashes of sword chi versus 9 flashes. This was an inherent difference in quality. Against such might, the old vicious mongoose naturally retreated one step after another. It certainly was a powerful king, but unfortunately, it encountered someone even more freakish, so it could only swallow the bitter fruit of defeat. After 100 more moves, Ling Han killed the old vicious mongoose. He hurriedly took the old vicious mongoose's corpse inside the Black Tower. This was a king amongst beasts. Wasting even a drop of blood was a huge loss. Ling Han processed it skillfully, peeling off its skin and breaking its bones ever so swiftly. Before, he was definitely not so practiced, but after picking up the Chowhound Hu Niu, he became quite agile in sorting out food. What? He found an unusual spot on the old vicious mongoose's cranium. There was a flower pattern on it, extremely complex. This is very similar to the vein-like patterns on the air blade it's fired out. Ling Han recalled as he said, precisely because it was blessed by such martial intent, the air blades were able to rival the sword chi fired out by Demon Birth Sword. Could it possibly be due to this piece of its skull? He was a heaven-tier elite in his former life anyhow, and in the depths of historic sites, he encountered quite a few powerful beasts, lacking opponents that were king tier. However, he'd never discovered one with bone patterns on its bones. He looked closely again and his spirit was instantly attracted by the pattern on the bones. The static patterns seemed to come alive, wriggling and changing as if expounding the Tao of heaven and earth. Got a real treasure. Ling Han felt a rush of excitement. He was certain that additional power of the old vicious mongoose's air blades came from the bone patterns. If he could thoroughly grasp it, then the chi he fired out would increase drastically in quality. Almost forgot Guang Yuan. He flashed out of the Black Tower and saw that Guang Yuan was still battling fiercely with the other vicious mongooses. He was injured at least in a dozen places, but on the side lay several mongooses not dead, but unconscious. If it weren't so, being able to kill his opponents, Guang Yuan definitely wouldn't be so in such a tight corner. However, to capture an opponent alive and to kill an opponent were 2 tasks definitely on different levels of difficulty. Ling Han nodded inwardly. Guang Yuan's battle prowess increased a lot. Cultivating the spiritual ocean tier again wasn't a bad thing for him before. He broke through to the spiritual pedestal tier in a rush and his foundation wasn't particularly firm. Walking the old route again, he had the experience to correct previous mistakes, and secondly, he wasn't in a rush to charge into the spiritual pedestal tier and could firmly solidify his foundation. In another half hour or so, Guang Yuan finally seized the remaining vicious mongooses, and then let out a bright laughter. Master Han, thankfully, I accomplished the mission. Ling Han nodded and said, go recover origin power. After you adjust to your peak state, charge at the spiritual pedestal tier. The spiritual chi here is extremely abundant and will be of great help in breaking through. I'll refine out the blood and flesh essence from the old vicious mongoose to aid you in your final accumulation. Thank you, Master Han, for your help, Guang Yuan said gratefully. If he followed another person, who would be willing to spend a king tier's beast's blood and flesh essence on a subordinate? Just from this point, he was willing to plunge into raging fire and boiling water for Ling Han. Chapter 469. Fishing. Reverie _ Ling Han boiled the old vicious mongoose and let Guang Yuan have the majority of the essence, while he and Li Si-chan ate a small portion. Afterwards, Guang Yuan immediately cultivated in seclusion again to charge at the spiritual pedestal tier, while Ling Han and Li Si-chan also received a good deal of benefits as they began to charge at the barrier of a small tier each. The higher the tier, the more solid the barrier of a small tier was, not easily broken through. It was alright below the flower blossom tier, but later, each small tier would be as hard to break through as if a large tier, needing the support of worldly treasures and medicinal pills. It could be said that before the flower blossom tier, the effect of medicinal pills was to help martial artists quickly complete the accumulation of origin power, and from the flower blossom tier onwards, the importance of medicinal pills further increased, having the effect of helping one break through the shackles of a tier. The blood and flesh of a king tier beast could be seen as a treasured medicine of the same tier, so the effect naturally worked like a charm, helping the three accumulate origin power to charge into a higher tier. After 2 hours, Ling Han was the first to complete a breakthrough, advancing into the second layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. Following him was Li Si-chan, who reached the third layer of the gushing spring tier. Although that wasn't high, with her talent in martial arts, cultivation and age, she could be counted as a genius back in Rain Country. Taking advantage of the time while Guang Yuan was breaking past the threshold, Ling Han took out the piece of bone branded with the pattern. It was clearly just a bone pattern, which seemed to be formed naturally, but it gave Ling Han a profound feeling, as if it was some sort of extremely advanced art shown in the form of a pattern. He diligently tried to figure it out. The bone pattern evolved continuously within his consciousness extremely complexly. I have to grasp it, this'll raise my battle prowess by a great deal, Ling Han said. Saying so was easy but doing it was too hard. Other than indestructible heaven scroll, it was the first time Ling Han encountered an art that he couldn't immediately comprehend, making him both surprised and even more interested. The old vicious mongoose was only at the spiritual pedestal tier, yet it could grasp the bone patterns, so was he inferior to a beast? 2 days passed. Guang Yuan finally came out of seclusion and returned to the spiritual pedestal tier. Congrats, big brother Guang, Li Si-chan said sweetly. Her indifference was only aimed at outsiders. Guang Yuan was overcome with joy. He never would have thought that only after half a year, he would return to the spiritual pedestal tier, and be even more powerful. If he encountered Duan Zhangji again, he was certain that he could kill the other with his own abilities. Thank you, young Master Han, for your help, he said to Ling Han, half kneeling. Ling Han nodded and stored away the old vicious mongoose's skull. In 2 days' time, he couldn't comprehend the bone patterns, so his mood soured. They set out. An indistinct pillar of light soaring into the sky could be seen in the distance, as if guiding their path. Since none of them knew where to go, they decided they might as well walk towards that direction. After half a day, a lake appeared in front of them. Even without approaching it, a terrifying chill assaulted them, making their blood feel like it was being frozen. At least 100 people surrounded the side of the lake. They were actually fishing. These people came in not long ago and were definitely not natives of this world. It was unheard of that there would be locals here. Ling Han's gaze swept by and saw his older cousin Yu Kai Yu. This guy was taking a massive net and waving it towards the lake, then drawing it up. His upper body was bare to the waist, revealing sturdy muscles. Was he perhaps showing off? There were so many people fishing, which meant the fish here were definitely not ordinary. Ling Han walked over and set off origin power, resisting the chill. Fortunately, although the chill was thorough to the bones, it was still resistible as long as one reached the element gathering tier. Apparently, the chill came from the lake, but the surface of the water was marked with ripples but no sign of freezing over, appearing extremely strange. Master Ling. My respects to Master Ling. Ling Han walked over. Quite a few people paid respects to him, and of course, there was a minority that ignored him, thinking that they had no requests for Ling Han to refine pills, so was it worthwhile to bootlick? It was still mainly because Ling Han was too young, making people envious. Otherwise, if he looked like an 80 or 90 years old man, it was guaranteed that the youngsters here would give him face. It couldn't be helped that youngsters were proud and arrogant and could only accept lowering their heads to the older generation. Ling Han was so young, even younger than most of the people here, naturally making people envious and unconvinced. Ling Han wasn't so idle as to make everyone be sincerely convinced about him. He smiled and nodded, asking someone, "What fish are you catching here?" "Absolute cold ice heart fish," the person said, then suddenly started, and pulled on the bamboo pole, fishing up a foot-long white fish. Its stomach was transparent white and its insides could clearly be seen, as if layers of ice. The person was exulted, and said while smiling, "Master Ling is truly naturally lucky. Once you came, I fished up this one. This is also the first absolute cold ice heartfish I fished up in 3 days." Inside Ling Han's mind, the information on absolute cold ice fish was immediately brought up. It was known as a treasured medicine amongst fish, greatly tonic especially for martial artists, because it could recover qi and blood, increase origin power, and was more effective than most medicinal pills. Because this was a naturally formed being, eating it wouldn't cause one to develop any drug resistance, nor did it hold any medicinal pill poison of sorts. It could be eaten as much as one wanted. At most, for one with a high tier, it would simply take more absolute cold ice heartfish to have an apparent effect. No one went into the water to fish because the water temperature was too cold. Even if spiritual pedestal tier warriors went into the water, it wouldn't take much time for them to be frozen into a block of ice. Ling Han was instantly enthused as he said to Guang Yuan and Li Xichan, "Let's also fish." There were almost all kinds of materials inside the Black Tower, and very soon, the three of them all had a fishing kit. The fishing line that Ling Han used was formed by blood-sucking origin gold, and he then took out a bunch of ginsengs from the Black Tower. This was bait. The absolute cold ice heartfish itself was a super tonic medicine, so it also loved to eat spirit medicine. This would be the best bait. However, spirit medicine was extremely precious, so how many people here could take out a second-tier or third-tier spirit medicine? Anything higher they probably didn't have, and even if they did, how much would they have? Precisely so, everyone's gains were so little. The bait wasn't very effective, so why would the absolute cold ice heartfish take the bait? What Ling Han lacked least was spirit medicine, and he definitely didn't lack those below the 5th tier. He took out 100-year-old ginsengs, and all were at least 100-year-old. It wasn't that he didn't have 1,000-year-old ones, but that it was too wasteful to use it for fishing. Ling Han threw some ginseng to Guang Yuan and Li Xichan while everyone looked at these stalks of ginsengs, which were thick as an arm, being thrown around like carrots. Their faces involuntarily twitched. Oh, envy and hate was too wealthy. Ling Han coiled the ginseng with blood-sucking origin gold, flung it casually, and it landed at the center of the lake, causing slight ripples. Chapter 470. Killing Spree. Reverie _ In a short while, Ling Han revealed a smile as his right hand shook, immediately pulling back blood-sucking origin gold. Shua, a large fish was pulled out of the water, 2 feet long and still whipping its tail vigorously. Compared to other people's baits, the 100-year-old ginseng's attractiveness was naturally far greater, and other people's fishing lines couldn't extend to the lake center. Only Ling Han's could, so it was a large one right off the bat. Ling Han suddenly had an idea and said to Small Tower, "The growth of spirit grasses can be sped up inside the Black Tower. Then can these fish that require harsh environments be raised? If so, he wouldn't eat them. Raising all these fish inside would be equivalent to another treasure." "No," Small Tower immediately said. Ling Han couldn't help but be disappointed. He would have to fish up as much as possible, and the ones he couldn't finish would be made into dried fish. All of it would be taken away. He changed to another ginseng and threw the line into the lake center. In a short while, there was a harvest again. Because the bait was outstanding, even Guang Yuan and Li Xichan frequently had gains. However, since they fished by the lakeside, the fish that were caught weren't large, about a foot long and incomparable to what Ling Han caught. Even so, the other martial artists fishing by the lakeside already had gazes full of desire, wishing they could steal some. However, facing a heaven-grade alchemist, who dared to act recklessly? If there wasn't anyone else here though, it would be all right. Who would know if they were killed? There was another problem. Ling Han's battle prowess was extremely astonishing, and although he didn't take the field in the prodigy battle, how terrifying was 20 stars spiritual infant tier battle prowess. Even if it were with the assistance of a spirit tool, one had to have a roughly similar spirit tool to resist, right?
Therefore, they could only drool secretly by the side.
However, there were always those who were restless. If I can't steal from you, and can't get more than you, who doesn't know how to cause trouble? The lake rippled as several people were throwing stones inside the lake, instantly startling the school of fish into running towards the lake bed. Ling Han instantly frowned and said to Guang Yuan, "Drive those people away."
"Yes, Master Han." Guang Yuan immediately stood up, out for a kill. Returning to the spiritual pedestal tier, he was just itching to fight. He took large strides over, killing intent overflowing. The expression of the nearest troublemaker instantly changed as he yelled towards Guang Yuan, "What are you trying to do?" "Making you piss off." Guang Yuan attacked, firing a punch. 5 war elephants surged out, firing at the person. "Damn it!" The person hurriedly parried whilst shouting loudly, "Master Ling, you're too high-handed, this lake isn't yours, why are you letting your subordinate assault me? You're trying to take the place all for yourself?" "Quite right, too high-handed. Worldly treasures naturally belong to the people of the world, what are you trying to do?" Someone chimed in, naturally being one of the other troublemakers. "Driving people away at every turn, that's too much." More troublemakers leapt out and approached Guang Yuan. They naturally didn't dare to do anything to Ling Han, who was a heaven-grade alchemist, but Guang Yuan was different. Only a dog of a heaven-grade alchemist. A dog. Well, slaughtering it was no big deal, because they were all came from large sects and had the self-assurance. Just like Yao Hui, you not caring about earth-grade alchemist, although these people weren't wild to that degree, the possibility of them needing to request a heaven-grade alchemist was almost zero, so why should they give him face? Guang Yuan's battle prowess was very strong, but he only just entered the spiritual pedestal tier after all. The breakthrough this time was returning to spiritual pedestal tier, and couldn't bring him the benefits from the heavenly luck stone, so his battle prowess was about 4 stars. Faced with the elite disciples of these large sects, 1 or 2 was all right, but any more, he could no longer resist. Under the surrounded attacks of 6 people, Guang Yuan was in imminent danger. The non-troublemakers watched the show by the side. Ling Han was too young, yet they had to pay respects to such a youngster and call him master. They were naturally annoyed on the inside, only too glad to enjoy the show. Ling Han's gaze turned cold as he stood up abruptly, walking towards the fray. "Master Ling, are you going to personally intervene?" a troublemaker said in a mocking tone. He wasn't a figure on the prodigy roll, but was extremely conceited and didn't believe that Ling Han once fired out battle prowess of 20 stars spiritual infant tier, thinking that someone intentionally lied in order to praise Ling Han. Ling Han revealed a cold smile and said, "Since you guys aren't willing to get lost, then you can all stay here." His right hand shook and the demon birth sword was unleashed. With a slash, the troublemaker's head immediately flew. Pooh! Blood started spilling violently out of the neck, rushing to a foot high before falling back down. Pa! The head fell on the ground with an expression of disbelief still on the face, its owner never expecting that Ling Han would suddenly kill him. He was a disciple of the Blood Flame Valley, the strongest sect from the North region, and all those who attacked him had to think before they acted. The gory slaughter instantly intimidated everyone. Killing a disciple of the Blood Flame Valley without hesitation, this meant that Ling Han had no qualms at all. Hiss! Could a heaven-grade alchemist really be so willful? Ling Han walked towards Guang Yuan. His killing intent overflowed, making the 6 troublemakers feel pressure all at once as they retreated involuntarily. However, it was too late as Ling Han struck, 6 flashes of sword chi slashing towards the 6 people. Pu, 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 pu. The 6 people had no power to resist at all and were instantly sliced into 2. The severed limbs and heads spilled over, blood everywhere. Everyone was terrified. The status of alchemists was beyond the norm, and a large part of that reason was because they didn't take part in dispute of interest with martial artists, so they could stay beyond the norm. Otherwise, with contention came conflict. How could they be beyond the norm? It was unheard of for an alchemist to take part in competing for treasures. Because alchemists knew why their status was beyond the norm, they isolated themselves from contention of benefits. However, Ling Han was without restraint, not only entering the mystery realm, but also killing resolutely and mercilessly, making people frightened. The 7 troublemakers were executed. Ling Han sheathed his sword and stared coldly at the surrounding people before returning to the original position, continuing to fish. He could pretend nothing happened, but the other people couldn't. Those 7 corpses with severed heads and heads still lay there, who could pretend not to see. Some people began to shiver in fear that Ling Han's murderous side would erupt, killing them all to do away with witnesses. These people left quietly, but some people were unwilling to give up on the absolute cold ice fish, still fishing. Chapter 471. A Great Beast Appears. Reverie _. With one forenoon, Ling Han already fished up over 100 absolute cold ice heart fish. On top of Li Si-chan and Guang Yuan's gains, their total reached 150, which was more than the total gain of everyone at the scene. This was precisely the principle of good tools being necessary for the successful execution of a job. When it was afternoon, Ling Han raised a bonfire and began to boil these treasured fish. 4 were roasted, and 4 were made into soup. Ling Han also added several spirit medicines. As it was boiling, the alluring fragrance spread out, making people drool. Moreover, this wasn't just the fragrance, because in the furnace appeared flashes of brilliance that soared into the sky, an amazing sight. It was the greatly tonic food that attracted the spirit chi of heaven and earth, forming a distinct sight. Everyone looked on enviously and hurriedly began boiling for themselves. However, they didn't have any spirit medicine to add in, so the soup they made was only light soup and couldn't be compared to Ling Han's pot at all. Ling Han looked at Yu Kai-yu and suddenly said, "Brother Yu, join us for a meal." Yu Kai-yu was startled, never thinking that Ling Han would actually open up to invite him. After being startled momentarily, he pointed at himself and said, "Me? What, brother, you won't give me face?" Ling Han said smilingly, "I hear you and old brother Guang have had a friendly relationship." Yu Kai-yu naturally recognized Guang Yuan. Back then, the 3 of them entered the subsect of the Thousand Corpse sect in Seaflow City, forming a friendship through battle. However, back then the other person was Han Lin, and not Ling Han, so Yu Kai-yu didn't dare to approach Ling Han was a heaven-grade alchemist after all. "Ha ha ha, receiving Master Ling's invitation. How could I dare not give face?" He took large strides over, and sat on the ground. The 4 of them each took a corner. Ling Han took out plates. It was exactly 1 grilled fish and a bowl of fish soup for each person. Inside the fish soup, neither the fish nor the spirit medicine could be seen, all stewed as the essence all entered the soup, which now appeared snow-white. Yu Kai-yu's expression was somewhat strange. 4 roasted fish. Could Ling Han already have had the idea of inviting him? "Here, don't be a stranger." Ling Han grabbed a roasted fish and started to eat. Li Si-chan and Guang Yuan naturally wouldn't hesitate. Those who have eaten with Hu Niu naturally formed the habit of eating quickly, or else there definitely would be no food to eat. This was a hard-learned lesson. Yu Kai-yu was bold and uninhibited in character, immediately tossing away formalities as he began to gobble down. "Wonderful! Wonderful! Wonderful!" He immediately praised greatly. Big fish are quite different. Not only the texture of the meat is more succulent, and the essence of the treasured medicine is also richer. "I guess if I ate a dozen, I could improve by 1 small tier." Guang Yuan also nodded. This was of immense help to him. Li Si-chan couldn't speak at all, as multicolored light surged out endlessly from her exquisite body. The meat and treasured medicine had already come into effect and were in the process of drastically increasing her cultivation. Her breakthrough was imminent. It was mainly because her tier was too low. Spiritual pedestal tier warriors needed dozen fishes to advance, but for a gushing spring tier, it was truly 1 bite for a small tier. Ling Han was extremely pleased. He was going to save some dried fish for Ling Dongxing. Once Ling Dongxing's spirit base was repaired, it could be imagined that his cultivation would have a shockingly explosive growth. Reaching the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier in 3 years definitely wasn't a dream. Li Si-chan couldn't even eat a second bite, and immediately sat on the ground to adjust, preparing to charge towards the 4th layer of the gushing spring tier. Yu Kai-yu felt it strange. Only young geniuses could enter, and young was in terms of tier to age. 100-year-old spiritual infant tier definitely belonged under the young. However, Li Si-chan was only at the gushing spring tier, and her age was roughly 20. Such a genius could be seen anywhere, so how did she qualify to enter the mystery realm? However, as he drank the fish soup and ate the roasted fish, he soon forgot this topic.
After he finished eating, he immediately sat cross-legged to adjust so as to refine the benefits inside his body as quickly as possible for it to truly be absorbed by the body.
Guang Yuan also did the same.
He had just broken through and needed the nourishment of such treasures.
Only Ling Han was depressed.
His spiritual pedestal was built too large, so while Guang Yuan and Yu Kai Yu only needed a dozen fish to advance one layer, he probably needed several hundred. Moreover, this was only the second layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. When it was fifth layer, or after the eighth layer, who knew how much this amount would increase by?
So, all he had to do was fish some more. Ling Han continued to boil absolute cold ice heart fish. He prepared to turn himself into a chowhound, angling whilst eating fish.
The fish here were definitely stupid. With no one fishing for hundreds of years, they kept coming one after another even after several hundreds of their pals disappeared, complying with an old saying, humans died in pursuit of wealth, and birds died in pursuit of food. At night, Ling Han already fished up over 300 absolute cold ice heart fish, and after slaughtering them, he stored them inside the Black Tower, making sure to lock the essence component and prevent it from running off. A night passed, and Ling Han continued to fish on the second day. But after a day, his harvest was much less compared to the previous day, suddenly 200 or so. It was unclear whether these fish got smarter, or there was a shortage of the entire population. Another day passed. Ling Han's harvests further decreased on the third day, with only a little over 100.
Everyone shook their heads.
This lake might be small, but the amount of absolute cold ice heartfish it could support was limited. There was just about that much. Hong, long, long. A whirlpool suddenly formed at the lake center. Originally, quite a few people already planned to leave, but as they saw this scene, they couldn't help but be surprised was some treasure about to come into the world. This wasn't impossible. Could a place where absolute cold ice heartfish could live be an ordinary place? The whirlpool spun fiercely and grew larger and larger. Hong, a surprising scene appeared as a strange creature emerged from the whirlpool. It had the head of a lion, but the body of a crocodile. It also had 6 legs and grew a pair of eagle wings on its back. Its entire body's length was about 3 feet or so. Now, this monster fluttered its eagle wings and flew towards the shore. Opening its wings, it emitted a terrifying presence. Everyone was terrified. This was a flower blossom tier beast. It was over. There were no flower blossom tier martial artists here, so how could they resist such a monster? Ling Han, however, revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. This beast emitted a presence far beyond normal flower blossom tier beasts, being no weaker than the gold-blooded demonic ape in the dark demon forest.
A king tier creature.
As expected of a mystery realm. He'd only entered for a few days and already encountered 2 king tier beasts. King tier beasts were equivalent to treasured medicine of the same tier. Those of the highest quality at that. Now, they appeared one after another. Was it not a pleasant surprise? Besides, the rock spirit could also be considered to be of the king tier, and even stronger than normal king tier beasts because it was spirit of the 5 elements, birthed by heaven and earth. Run! It was unknown who first yelled out the word as everyone fled in disarray. Spiritual ocean tier and spiritual pedestal tier cultivators encountered a flower blossom tier being other than running. What else could they do?
Chapter 472. Rock Spirit Performs. Reverie _
Ling Han immediately guided strange fire and formed an area of flames around him, guarding Li Si-chan, Guang Yuan, and Yu Kai Yu behind him. Pu the ice blades stormed over but were melted by the flames, turning into water vapor that rose into the air. However, the powerful martial intent contained within the ice blades didn't completely disappear, continuing to barrage the 4 of them. Other than Ling Han, the other 3 groaned, feeling an unbearable splitting headache. Receiving a flower blossom tier martial intense assault, they naturally got no good out of it. Ling Han was fine, possessing a sliver of a heaven tier divine sense. Only a heaven tier martial intent could threaten his divine sense. Under this attack, half of the several hundred people at the scene were done for, with only 50 to 60 people alive. It's hopeless, we're going to die.
Yu Kai Yu said grimacingly.
Ling Han laughed instead and said, Brother Yu, Could your esteemed father not have given you any spirit talismans or law decrees of sorts before letting you leave?
It's only a flower blossom tier beast, not enough to kill us, right? Even Feng Yan could obtain a spiritual infant tier's law decree, let alone Yu Kai Yu who was a grandson. The great beast oppressed them with its presence right off the bat, making people terrified, and then suddenly unleashing an ultimate attack, killing most and leaving no chance for others to use their trump cards. Yu Kai Yu smiled mischievously and said, "With Master Ling by my side, my belongings aren't worth mentioning and would only embarrass me." Ling Han shook his head and said, "Want to have a taste of a flower blossom tier king tier great beast's deliciousness?" Yu Kia Yu was shocked, revealing a dumbstruck expression. "Master Ling, you're actually confident in annihilating this beast? Wait, this is actually a great beast at king tier?" He certainly had spiritual infant tier's law decrees with him. Using to suppress spiritual pedestal tier beings was naturally as easy as the turn of a palm. However, the effect of it decreased greatly against those of king tier quality, and it was almost useless against a flower blossom tier 1. The beast before him was not only in the flower blossom tier, but even a king tier, and could almost be seen as half a spiritual infant tier 1. The spiritual infant tier law decrees oppressive might would definitely have no effect at all and would have to be expended for him to escape. It could only help him escape, yet Ling Han actually wanted to annihilate this great beast. That was a complete joke. "I'm not kidding," Ling Han said smilingly. Yu Kai Yu didn't believe him and said, "Even if you also have a spiritual infant tier law decree, the law decree's might is limited, and could perhaps fend off a normal flower blossom tier creature, but against a king tier, that's definitely not going to work." He paused and then continued, "Let's hurry up and run." Ling Han said smilingly, "Cooperate with me later. When I tell you to use a law decree, use it." Hey, don't you get self-involved like that." Yu Kai Yu hurriedly shouted, but Ling Han didn't listen to him at all, making him extremely gloomy and giving him a familiar feeling as if he'd experienced this situation somewhere. Ling Han obviously wasn't personally going to fight against this great beast. Although he was freakish, no matter what, he couldn't cross over the mortal boundary. He summoned the massive golem and said, "Small rock, go." "A puppet," Yu Kai Yu blurted out. Spirits of the 5 elements were too rare and living beings couldn't be stored into spatial rings. This was common sense. Besides, the golem was way too different from normal spirits. Therefore, Yu Kai Yu subconsciously thought of it as a puppet created by formation masters. The golem and the beast collided. A range of chilling chi filled the air, turning the entire area into a world of ice and snow. The people who withstood the first wave of attack hurriedly unleashed their trump cards one after another, some of which were spirit tools, while others were spirit talismans, and even spiritual infant tier law decrees. The people that were able to enter this place all carried the hopes of some sect. If they could obtain some ancient art, they might be able to rise up powerfully, overtaking the other 3 regions and even challenging the noble sects of the middle state. Therefore, everyone more or less had some treasures to defend themselves, and the quality of the treasures varied as status varied. "Such a powerful puppet," Yu Kai Yu muttered. It could actually fight a king tier flower blossom tier beast. It was truly powerful. The golem had just entered the flower blossom tier, but the great beast had long advanced into this tier, reaching the 7th layer. Theoretically, the rock spirit was definitely no match for the great beast. A king tier against a king tier was naturally decided by whose tier was the higher. However, the massive golem wasn't a normal king tier, but a spirit of the 5 elements. It was not only tough and thick-skinned, but also boasted surprising recovery power. Even if it were shattered into a hideous mess, its body could still quickly recover, something Ling Han had already experienced himself. Back then, when he took the upper hand, he still couldn't annihilate those small golems. It could be imagined just how terrifying the rock spirit's recovery power was. It was the same now as the great beast certainly claimed the absolute advantage, easily shattering and crippling the rock spirit with the flap of its wings or by opening its mouth, but the massive golem quickly recovered as if it were perfectly fine. However, the rock spirit's recovery power wasn't endless as it became slower and slower. While the great beast's battle prowess naturally had its limit as well, it was a match of stamina. Ling Han naturally wouldn't wait for the rock spirit to be exhausted before intervening, hurriedly saying to Yu Kai Yu, "Time to use the law decree." Yu Kai Yu nodded. He originally didn't have any hopes, but this puppet was truly fierce,
resisting even a king-tier great beast of the flower blossom tier. As expected of a puppet, as long as its core wasn't damaged and formation patterns weren't broken, it could be used without end. He took out a law decree and opened it. Instantly, golden light overflowed, spreading an infinitely powerful oppressive might. How could a spiritual infant tier law decree be ordinary? However, the oppressive might alone was useless. The flower blossom tier great beast didn't fear it at all, so Yu Kai-yu threw the law decree after locking on to the great beast. Suppress! Hong, the law decree actually began to burn with raging flames, from which a pair of golden fists about the size of a millstone surged out, firing towards the great beast. This was a spiritual infant tier level attack. Even the great beast didn't dare to oppose its power, hurriedly evading. However, the massive golem charged at it, grasping it tightly. The great beast was shocked and furious. Although the spiritual infant tier attack might be strong, it only had to flap its wings to break away, but now it was clasped by the golem, and the heavy force made it unable to fly. Even it couldn't resist bearing a spiritual infant tier's attack head-on. If it weren't killed, it'd still be heavily injured. From its point of view, the golem was hopelessly stupid. All living beings should place survival first, and risking one's own life shouldn't even exist in this world. It never would have thought that the rock spirit would do such a thing, and now it could only stare blankly at the pair golden fist firing over. Pang! With a loud noise, the sky was filled with flying rubble. The great beast was also heavily injured, falling down with a broken wing. Chapter 473. Dare to Rob Me. Reverie _ Injured but not dead, proving itself to be a king-tier great beast of the flower blossom tier, it took spiritual infant tier attack head-on and survived. It was quite shocking. Ling Han hallooed and leapt out with his sword, attacking the great beast. Given it time, the great beast might recover a bit, and if it wanted to escape into the lake, then there would be no way of finding it. This was called kill it while it's sick. Xiao, the golden fists disappeared after the attack. After all, this was only an attack that a spiritual infant tier sealed into the law decree. Ling Han shot out, attacking right at it. The great beast revealed a furious look. It was a king tier, and a mere martial artist of the spiritual pedestal tier dared to initiate an attack on it. This was looking down on it way too much. If it were still at the peak phase, then firing out an ice blade would be enough to annihilate Ling Han. But it was at its weakest moment, unable to move even its wings. So, how could it fire out ice blades? It naturally wouldn't wait helplessly for death. With a glare, it sent out martial intent shooting towards Ling Han. If the martial intent struck, it was guaranteed that the human brat would turn into an idiot. The great beast was extremely confident, as it was a king of the flower blossom tier and its martial intent was too terrifying. However, it immediately revealed an extremely shocked expression because Ling Han's offensive didn't slow down the slightest bit. With the swing of the sword, 10 flashes of sword chi fired out, firing towards the relatively more fragile neck. How was it possible? If it could speak the language of humans, it definitely would immediately cry out, but it was so feeble that it couldn't even open its mouth, simply staring helplessly at the 10 flashes of sword chi furiously slashing towards it. Pu. The sword chi was unleashed by a 10th tier spirit tool, so its destructive power was extremely shocking. Even a king-tier great beast of the flower blossom tier couldn't defend against it with its physical body. The 10 flashes of sword chi swept by devastatingly as a deep wound emerged instantly on its neck. However, this wasn't the most lethal. The demon birth sword striking it was the most terrifying attack. How sharp was a 10th tier spirit tool? Even sword chi could cut open its flesh, let alone the direct attack of demon birth sword. The great beast revealed a terrified look. It absolutely didn't want to die, and even more so to die at the hands of a human at the spiritual pedestal tier. Pooh! The sword slashed through and a lion head instantly shot into the sky. Ling Han reached out extremely quickly, grabbing onto the great beast's body, and directly stored it inside the black tower so as not to waste any part of it. However, even though he was quick, there was still a lot of blood that splattered outwards. Xiao, a figure darted out, grabbing the lion head and leaving immediately. Such nerve! Ling Han immediately shifted his figure, chasing towards that person. This person dared to rob him? Behind him, Pieces of rubble slowly gathered as the rock spirit was in the process of reconstructing itself.
The robber's speed was fast, or else he wouldn't dare to do such a thing. Obviously, daring to rob meant he had absolute confidence in his movement art. However, he overestimated himself and underestimated Ling Han. The movement art that Ling Han used also changed into an Earth Grade 1 called 100 Changes 1000 Illusions. It not only could form afterimages to confuse opponents during battle, but also worked like a charm for chasing or running, astonishingly quick. Competing in movement arts with Ling Han? Other than monsters such as Hu Niu, who else could do so in the same tier? After a few leaps and landings, Ling Han caught up to that person.
Humph, take it back.
The person was rather straightforward. Seeing that he couldn't escape, he just shook his right hand and threw the lion head far away, obviously planning to take advantage of the time Ling Han needed to go pick it up to run again. Ling Han swung his left hand, firing out blood-sucking origin gold. He tanged and pulled back the lion head, storing it in the black tower. His figure didn't move a bit, continuing to chase after that person.
His eyes were like swords as he said balefully, "You think you'll be let off so lightly?"
He swung his sword to slash. Master Ling, contesting for treasures is quite a normal thing. Why take it seriously? The person wasn't weak, waving his saber to parry as 7 flashes of saber chi waved.
Ling Han snorted and said, "If you also participated in exterminating the great beast, then you'd certainly have the right to a share of the spoils of war.
However, you're clearly just a base thief, daring to speaking shamelessly. Truly laughable." Ding, 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 the saber and sword collided. Sparks radiated all around and martial intent burst forth blindingly with divine light. How strong was Ling Han's battle prowess? Only after a few moves, the person's expression changed drastically. He was no match at all. He hurriedly shouted, "I'm Cold Water Sect's disciple Feng Jing Shang. Even if you're a heaven-grade alchemist, you can't act recklessly." "Idiot!"
Ling Han cursed, the momentum of his sword unchanged.
He was a heaven-grade alchemist, so would he still be afraid of offending someone? Only a force that walked in the shadows like the Thousand Corpse sect wouldn't fear a heaven-grade alchemist. Otherwise, among those sects that got along normally, which of those wouldn't give a heaven-grade alchemist face on the surface?
"I'll fight you to death."
Feng Jing Shang roared and took out a spirit talisman from a ring, pretending to throw it out. "This is Raging Flame's Burning Sky talisman created by a Flower Blossom tier senior from my sect, equivalent to 1/10 of his attack. Don't you force me." Ling Han was too lazy to even curse this time, striking non-stop with his long sword.
"Die!"
Feng Jing Shang threw out the spirit talisman. Hong instantly, a raging flame rose out from the spirit talisman and turned into a sea of flames, burning towards Ling Han. Ling Han felt it slightly and activated the thunder battle armor.
Instantly, a lightning barrier formed, shielding him within as he rushed out of the sea of fire and struck again with his sword.
"What?" Feng Jing Shang revealed an expression of disbelief. That was a Flower Blossom tier's attack, but Ling Han actually blocked it. This was too unreal.
However, without giving him time for the second thought, the demon birth sword already slashed through him from top to bottom as his entire body was instantly slashed into 2 halves.
Ling Han sheathed his sword. With his current power to activate the thunder battle armor with all his strength, blocking a low-layer Flower Blossom tier's attack was more than enough. Everyone looked at him with fear, their gazes extremely complicated.
With the identity of a heaven-grade alchemist alone, no one dared to go against him on the surface, and his personal battle prowess was even more nature-defyingly powerful.
Being born in the same time as Ling Han was really the greatest misfortune. Ling Han naturally wouldn't care how others looked at him. He smiled at Yu Kai Yu and said, "More tonic meat of a king-tier beast to eat at night."
Yu Kai Yu was startled as Ling Han just said, "More." So could he have already eaten such a greatly tonic thing?
He didn't dare to believe it, simply thinking Ling Han misspoke. Laughing on spot, he said, "Wasting a spiritual infant tier law decree to annihilate it, I have to eat that worth's back." Ling Han patted his shoulder and said, "You definitely have more than one spiritual infant tier law decree, don't pretend to be poor." Yu Kai Yu smiled mischievously. Obviously Ling Han hit the nail and retorted, "You think spiritual infant tier law decrees are cheap? This paper, this ink, and the pen used, those are all extremely precious materials. Moreover,
My great-grandfather needs to recover for several months just drawing one law decree. Ling Han was too lazy to pay attention to him, focusing his gaze on the lake as he said, "The chilling intent is waning. Was this absolutely cold place formed due to the great beast?"
Chapter 474. Lake Bed Edifice. Reverie _ Once the great beast died, the chilliness emitted from the lake evidently subsided. Thinking back on how this great beast could fire out ice blades, it should also be a water-type and ice element beast. Its existence affected the environment, turning the lake so cold and subsequently fostering the existence absolute cold ice heartfish. Not good. Once this great beast is dead, the lake will warm up again and those ice fish will all die. Ling Han said somewhat regrettably. Although there weren't many absolute cold ice heartfish left.
That shouldn't be wasted.
Yu Kai-yu hurriedly said.
Let's go into the water to catch fish.
Ling Han nodded and said to Li Si-chan, stay on the shore. Although the chilliness began to retreat, it still wasn't tolerable for the gushing spring tear. It'd possibly take 1 to 2 more days before the lake's temperature would return to its normal status. Li Si-chan nodded. She never pushed herself too hard in martial arts. The three of them went into the lake. Some of the other people also felt the change in the lake's temperature as they jumped into it one after another, spreading origin power to form a shield and roaming within the water. One breath was enough for a spiritual pedestal tier martial artist to hold for about an hour, and on top of the air within the shield, enduring for 1 day definitely wouldn't be a problem. Therefore, everyone could explore the lake bed as much as they liked without worrying about suffocating at all. The lake was still quite cold, but tolerable for spiritual pedestal tier cultivators. Everyone spread out to search for absolute cold heart ice fish. The three of them also separated. The cold heart fish wasn't some impressive beast that they needed to join hands for. After a few minutes, Ling Han arrived at the lake bed and saw several damaged kiosks and pavilions, as if these edifices only sunk down to the lake bed after experiencing an earthquake. Thinking so, he swam over. After the fish were fished repeatedly by him for 3 days, there weren't many left, and now there were so many people fishing in the lake. How many could each person even get? He had already obtained 600 to 700, and didn't really care about a few dozen more. There were about 8 to 9 lake bed kiosks and pavilions. Because they were buried under the lake bed's mud, revealing only the top, Ling Han didn't know whether there were more edifices hidden deeper underneath the lake bed. Pressing gently with his palms, a momentous force surged as he appeared at the 2-layer pavilion, swimming into it through the 2nd-floor window. This was a study room, but the books on the bookshelves had all long rotted away and left only a few covers that escaped disaster, floating within the water. Ling Han reached out, gently grabbing onto a book that had State of Poo's geographic record. Was there a place in the vast lands called State of Poo? Ling Han wasn't quite sure, because in the time of his former lifetime, the place names of the vast lands had an extremely great difference compared to now. Who could guarantee that 2 or 5 millennia ago the place names of various places in the vast lands were the same? Perhaps there was a place called the State of Poo. He grabbed another cover, which had 36 free transformations on formations, written on it. Ling Han was instantly moved formations. How unfortunate there was only a cover left. If he could get a peek at it, it would probably be of great help for his formation mastery level. He grabbed another 3 covers, and after glancing over them, his expression changed involuntarily. Insights on Refining Clear Void Pill, Red Leaf Pill, Purple Patterned Gold Pill. This was a personal letter on pill refining, and it probably gave an account of the details in refining the 3 types of medicinal pills. This wasn't much in itself. Similar to his previous lifetime, Ling Han would also make notes in passing after refining to remind himself, and for his 2 alchemy disciples to reference. What shocked Ling Han was the 4 words Purple Patterned Gold Pill. This was a divine medicine. At the late periods of his former lifetime, he'd entered several historic sites, among which were cave dwellings of great ancient alchemists, and obtained a few personal notes. On them, Ling Han once saw the 4 words Purple Patterned Gold Pill. Purple Patterned Gold Pill. After taking one of those, as long as they didn't die from exploding, mortals could become gods. What sort of divine medicine was this? Ling Han believed that divine medicinal pills were also separated by tiers,
And how could a normal divine pill turn a mortal into a god on the spot? However, in the vast lands, there was no way to refine any sort of divine pill, because there were no ingredients. In here, the 3 types of medicinal pills were placed side by side, probably all divine pills. As for insights, the person must have refined it before, or else how could there be insights? One who could refine divine pills in the vast lands, and very possibly a high-tier divine pill. Absolutely impossible. Ling Han's hands were trembling slightly as a guess welled up within. Could this mystery realm belong to a god that refined an area in the god realm and brought it down to the lower realm? The chance of this guess being correct was extremely great because Yen Tianzhao wanted something from the Sagittarius Palace. Who was Yen Tianzhao? Although of mortal body, he received a god's memory, and from a certain perspective, he was more kick***ss than Ling Han, who was a heaven-tier reincarnate. Could something that he coveted be ordinary? It had to be a divine thing. If this place where a part stripped formed the gold realm, then it would be easy to understand, explaining why the spirit chi in here was so indispersably thick. Moreover, why the beasts here had bone patterns on their skulls. Because they were beasts of the god realm, as simple as that. Ling Han's heart sped up involuntarily. Could he be getting an inheritance from the god realm? Kick***. Awesome. With this speculation, Ling Han began to search more carefully. Anything here that was found could be a treasure of the divine level. However, he was disappointed. The things inside the room were extremely normal, and the books, made of paper, rotted away. The wood, which was also not some sort of divine wood, rotted away. The bricks were also the same, just slightly harder. But whatever, take it all. With a thought and a touch, Ling Han stored the entire pavilion inside the Black Tower. The space was so big anyway, no fear of taking up space. He swam towards another pavilion and stored it once again, and then the third building. A kiosk was also moved into the Black Tower. At this moment, someone also swam over, and didn't seem to have any interest in absolute cold heart icefish, staring at the sunken group of buildings in the lake bed instead. That was a girl at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier cultivation, but she was also over 30, probably someone on the prodigy roll in former generations. Her looks already passed the peak period, but were maintained very well. Her eyes were like a painting, and her cherry lips were bright red like blood, vibrantly attractive. Compared to a 20-year-old lady, a woman of this age won in her ample figure and titillating bearing, as if a ripe peach, plump and juicy. After seeing Ling Han, the woman nodded at Ling Han. This was respect for a heaven-grade alchemist. She already swam into a pavilion and began to search. Ling Han continued to store the buildings here indiscriminately. Chapter 475. Divine Temple. Reverie _. After a few minutes, the woman came out from the pavilion and revealed puzzled expression. She clearly remembered that there were several damaged pavilions and kiosks nearby, but how come now they were all gone? Without finishing her train of thought, Ling Han already swam over, and with a swipe, the pavilion behind her disappeared. What? Bizarre shock was written all over the woman's face. Those pavilions and kiosks were all taken away by Ling Han. Are you a damn trash picker? She saw clearly that there was absolutely nothing valuable inside the pavilion. Even she took no liking to anything, let alone a dignified heaven-grade alchemist. However, she was immediately shocked. A pavilion was stored just like that. How large was that spatial ring? Ling Han didn't care. Even if everyone knew his spatial ring was massive, would they dare to rob him? To offend a heaven-grade alchemist for a spatial spirit tool wasn't worth it, no matter how large the space was. Of course, if they knew Black Tower's true use, then it mattered not whether Ling Han was a heaven-grade alchemist. Even the gods would rush up to rob him. Ling Han began to dig up the edifices underneath the ground. Several edifices only revealed their tips. 1, 2, and 3 buildings. He stored them with great pleasure. Even if it was for nothing, it wouldn't have wasted much time, but if there were some gains by any chance, then the profits would certainly be great. What? He discovered a rooftop and stored it in passing, yet discovered that the rooftop was still there and hadn't been stored into the Black Tower. He tried again, still to no avail. He couldn't help but find it strange, examining it closely. The rooftop was really quite different. This was a pointy rooftop, and the entire rooftop was whole, without tiles, and also completely gold.
Why couldn't it be stored inside the Black Tower? Ling Han brushed with both hands, and instantly, clouds of silt scattered at the lakebed as if a flood dragon twisted the entire lakebed into a murky mess. It was hard to see even one's own 5 fingers. Ling Han was more and more surprised. Within the lakebed, more parts of the building emerged. The golden walls were completely different from the other edifices, and after digging for about 3 feet, the entire building was still not revealed. The strange thing was that this building was actually triangular. The further towards the bottom, the larger the building's surface area was. Earlier, at the top was only a pointy cone. The stranger thing was that Ling Han hadn't even seen a single window, as if he dug out a piece of metal, except it was ridiculously large. He became more and more curious, and the woman on the side also became interested, digging at the other end. The lake silt was already soft, and with the great powers of 2 spiritual pedestal tier warriors, 300 feet was dug up, and more of the golden building was shown. However, it still wasn't the bottom of it, and the building still had no windows or doors. Strange. More and more people were drawn over. There weren't many absolute cold heart ice fish left, so after a short contention, everyone stopped fishing, turning their gazes here. It was really strange that there was such a building underneath the lakebed. Everyone started to dig in the lakebed. After several thousand feet, they finally dug to the bottom, revealing the building's entire features. A divine temple, Ling Han muttered. He'd seen a description of a similar building in ancient records. These triangular edifices existed in Gold Realm, mostly for sacrificial offerings, but also other purposes. The Golden Divine Temple was huge and imposing, existing as a whole despite being 1,000 feet tall. Many animals on the large door were things Ling Han had never even seen. The living spirits of God Realm. And on the other side, someone couldn't help but push at the large door. Hong long long, instantly the 3 large doors opened simultaneously, revealing 3 dim passageways. The lake water instantly flowed inside, surging into the Divine Temple. The Divine Temple was as if it had turned into a massive sky-swallowing whale, producing a powerful suction power. A few people weren't on guard and were immediately sucked into the Divine Temple, while most people hurriedly pushed against the water, rising towards the lake's surface. The devouring power was shocking. After 10 minutes the entire lake completely disappeared, turning into a massive pit. A divine temple stood erect, emitting a blinding golden light as if it were forged from pure gold. Although martial artists viewed gold and silver as dirt, but then a massive lump of dirt towered aloft in front of them, still making them feel quite astonished. When all the lake water had disappeared, the divine temple no longer produced suction power, standing erect silently as if a monument, making people feel an instinctive reverence from the bottom of their hearts. Everyone cried out in surprise. Never would they have thought that an imposing and unusual building would be hidden underneath the lakebed. Ling Han, however, was very careful. The people who were sucked into the divine temple earlier hadn't even shown up. What could this mean? First, it was extremely dangerous inside and they were trapped, or even dead. Second, the divine temple had lots of treasures, so those people were collecting it, never even having the thought of coming out. Which one was it? Ling Han's curiosity was already burning incessantly. He decided to enter to explore. He wasn't the only one who thought so, as several people already started forming parties, entering as a group. It could be extremely dangerous inside, and if there were treasures, the chances of winning them over would be greater together. With a short amount of time, more people came from afar, and the number of people increased once again. You guys entering or not? Ling Han asked Yu Kai Yu and Guang Yuan. Li Si-chan had also walked over. Enter, of course enter. Yu Kai Yu hurriedly said. If Master Han is entering, then I'll definitely follow, Guang Yuan said. All right, let's go in and have a look, Ling Han said smilingly. He had the Black Tower in hand, so he could keep everyone safe. Let's go. The 4 departed and climbed along the lake walls. This was 1,000 feet, and now the water had dried up, revealing pure white rocks. If one were to leap down, falling into bits and pieces would be the greatest possibility. Li Si-chan was only at the gushing spring tier and climbed very slow. Ling Han decided he might as well pick her up by the waist and climbed with one hand, yet he climbed more agilely than Guan Yuan and Yu Kai Yu, heading towards the lake bed at a surprisingly fast pace. The lake was now an abyss. This was a cliff, but a drenched cliff, and made mostly of mud. A single misstep could cause one to fall down. After only a few minutes, Ling Han was the first to arrive at the lake bed. As he lowered Li Si-chan down, the beauty's cheeks were flushed, and her eyes were like spring water, glistening and beautiful. Chapter 476. Blood-sucking bugs. Reverie _ After a few minutes, Yu Kai-yu and Guang Yuan also arrived by his side. Their speed wasn't fast, as there were already 4 teams that had entered the Divine Temple from 3 different entrances. Ling Han started walking towards the passageway. Yu Kai-yu and the others hurriedly followed. They unconsciously took Ling Han as their core, listening to his plans. They entered the Divine Temple. It was pitch dark inside, but with the eyesight of the spiritual pedestal tier, they could still see in a radius of more than 3 meters. Ling Han could see up to 10 times that because he cultivated the Eye of Truth, having eyesight that surpassed martial artists of the same tier. Inside the Divine Temple was emptiness, without a single pillar. It could be imagined how vast the space was. This layer was a meter in height, and the top was grayish-black walls, giving people the feeling of inhibition. It was very quiet here. The echo of the sound of footsteps kept resonating within this vast space. It was too empty, there was nothing at all. They continued onwards. Even if there wasn't anything in this layer, there was still the second and the third layer. And calculating based on the height of the Divine Temple, there should be at least several hundred layers. Because it was too empty in here, they had no delays on their way, very soon arriving at the core area of this layer, where they found a staircase that led to the second layer. They obviously weren't the first to arrive, the 4 groups that entered earlier had all arrived, but didn't tread on. Their reason being the 6 corpses that lay at near the stairway. It was the same people who had been engulfed by the lake water. All dead, and their Hippocratic face was extremely terrifying, as if moisture in their bodies had been drained dry, turning them into dried corpses. Ling Han and the others could recognize that these were the people who entered earlier because of the clothes they wore. As for the faces, a dried-up corpse's face was quite hard to recognize. With the emptiness here, if a fierce battle broke out, the sound should have reached the doors, but the 6 people died without a sound, without even a single cry in fear. What did this explain? The 6 people were almost simultaneously killed, so none of them let out a scream, nor was there any trace of a battle. The killer's strength should be quite strong. Precisely based on this awareness, the people here came to a halt. Although everyone knew that risks accompanied opportunities, no one wanted to lose their life for no reason. They had to be cautious, and even more cautious. Ling Han observed. It was too empty here, nothing could be hidden, and he could see clearly that there really was nothing. The stairway was immaculate, without any foreign matter anywhere. Where could the killer be hiding? Almost at the same time, everyone's gaze turned towards the end of the stairway, the second layer of the Divine Temple. If the killer hid at the entrance of the second layer, taking advantage of when the 6 people climbed the steps to suddenly kill them, and then threw the 6 corpses down. Was there such a possibility? What, there's 1 person missing, someone suddenly said. Although I don't remember the total amount of people swept in, but I recognized one of them, and his corpse is definitely not amongst them. In other words, that person escaped. The first layer couldn't hide people at all, so if that person escaped, that person could only have entered the second layer. So they thought, but no one acted blindly without thinking. What if the killer still lay in ambush at the entrance of the second layer, preparing to carry out a lightning-fast attack? When one was in the open, and the enemy was in the dark, this was too dangerous. Ling Han, however, wasted no time, taking large strides forward. He had absolute confidence. As expected of Master Ling, such great courage, everyone complimented. Obviously not many were sincere, only wanting Ling Han to take the lead. Ling Han obviously wouldn't care. He was too curious as to what exactly was hidden within this temple that seemed to be from the god realm. Why was it buried beneath the lake bed? He walked to the side of the stairs, everything was normal. He took a step onto the stairway, and everything was still normal. The danger came from the entrance to the second layer. At this moment, almost everyone formed the same consensus.
while Li Xichan, Guang Yuan, and Yu Kai were especially nervous, clenching their fists tightly and staring with wide eyes. With another step, Ling Han's head was about to cross into the second layer. Ling Han temporarily halted, raising his head to look at the top. The end of the stairway was a blurry spinning ring of light, and seen from here, nothing could be seen clearly. It seemed that the situation in the second layer couldn't be seen unless one entered.
Master Han!
Li Xichan and Guang Yuan yelled out nervously. Ling Han nodded and took fierce step down, instantly shooting like an arrow and worming extremely quickly into the spinning light ring. Xiao, his figure flashed, and he already appeared in another space. The environment here was oddly dusky, but compared to the first layer's dark space, it was much brighter. At least the eyesight of normal spiritual pedestal tier warriors could reach around 300 m.
A barren field underneath his feet, and the nearby 1,000-meter radius of land was completely dark red, as if molded by the coagulation of fresh blood.
Hiss, to dye such a large field of land black, how much blood was needed? Besides, this place was really massive. Ling Han looked far. The skies here exceeded 300 m in height, already exceeding the divine temple's height. This was another small world, its space compressed by a powerful being using mystical arts, forming a world of its own. Before his thought finished, he heard wang sounds as infinite black dots rose from the ground, suddenly swarming towards him.
With his impressive eyesight, he saw clearly with a glance that these were small flying bugs. They were shaped like mosquitoes, and their mouth parts were sharp and long.
As they fluttered their wings, wang sounds were emitted. As it turned out, it wasn't that the ground was dyed black with blood but squeezed full of these bugs. Once they flew, the ground became an earthy yellow, no different from the land outside. Ling Han instantly realized that the 6 people earlier had their blood sucked dry by these bugs. The killers were found. The unknown was the most frightening. Since he knew the killer's true identity, Ling Han felt calmer instead. Hong, he activated strange fire, and instantly, a field of flames swept out. Z. These bugs let out sharp cries, burning to ashes in their hundreds and thousands and falling down. However, more bugs still swarmed over, completely unafraid of death, even using their companions as cover. They pierced through the flames and swarmed right before Ling Han. Let's see how good your teeth are. Ling Han smiled lightly. As long as it weren't teeth such as Hu Niu's, he still had the confidence that within the same tier nothing could harm his iron sheet body. As expected, these bugs stung his skin to suck blood, but snapped their mouthparts instead, unable to drill through it all. However, Ling Han also felt a slight sense of pain. Apparently, the stinging of these mouthparts somewhat affected him. This was quite surprising as his physique was completely no weaker than rare metals of the same tier, but he still felt a slight sense of pain, meaning that the destructive power of these bugs was still quite surprising. No wonder the 6 people earlier died at the entrance. The moment they entered the second layer, they probably immediately suffered the attacks of the blood-sucking bugs, and without the defensive power such as Ling Han's to bear their attacks head-on, they thought of escaping to the first layer. However, they were too late, and by the time they rushed out, they'd already been sucked dry of their blood. Chapter 477. In the Name of the Masses. Reverie _ Ling Han attacked with his sword. 10 flashes of sword chi shot out from the demon birth sword, and without touching these bugs, the powerful destructive power could shatter them into pieces half a meter or so away. Strange fire raged as well. Its destructive power was even more terrifying. With only 1 to 2 minutes, Ling Han annihilated tens of thousands of blood-sucking bugs, but there seemed to be an infinite number of them as more and more blood-sucking bugs flew up from the ground. Ling Han was very shocked. The area of several hundred square meters was packed with these blood-sucking bugs. The total amount was probably in the billions. His physique was certainly overpowering, but if he were stung by billions of blood-sucking bugs continuously, then even his body of iron that was comparable to rare metals of the same tier would probably be breached. This blood-sucking bug nest was at the entrance to the second layer. How coincidental. Was this planned not to let anyone pass through? Retreat. Ling Han hesitated slightly. Fighting desperately obviously wasn't cost-effective. These blood-sucking bugs individually might only be at the 9th layer of the spiritual ocean tier, with a few spiritual pedestal tier honest, but when gathered together, no matter any spiritual pedestal tier elite, all would quiver in fear. He decided to retreat.
This wasn't his own matter, so naturally he didn't need to fight to the death alone. Unfortunately, inside the Black Tower, the massive golem was still slowly recovering. Receiving an attack of a spiritual infant tier law decree, despite its overbearing recovery power, it wouldn't be able to recover in a short while. With his battle prowess, completely annihilating these blood-sucking bugs was somewhat difficult, but charging out of there was an effortless thing. He split open the swarm of bugs and crossed through the entrance. Everything suddenly turned dark before his eyes as he appeared in the space of the first layer, which was utterly pitch black. "He's back!" everyone cried out. "So, how was it? What exactly is inside?" everyone asked all at once. Ling Han ignored them. Hey, Master Ling, you won't share the information you discovered with everyone?" someone reprimanded. "That's right, now that everyone's fighting side by side, you're not even telling us the situation. How petty, absolutely having no bearing of a great master." "I misjudged you," Ling Han sneered. These people dared to reprimand him because his tier was not as high and he was without any elite followers. Otherwise, any medium-level Earth-grade alchemist wouldn't lack Flower Blossom tier elite followers by their side, and no junior would dare to be impudent in front of him. He glanced at everyone in the surrounding and said, "If you want to know, go see for yourself." Everyone was furious, feeling that Ling Han was too petty. He clearly entered, so why not share with them the information about the other side? Moreover, seeing how disorderly Ling Han was when he ran out, it was obvious that inside was filled with danger. They naturally wanted to know what the environment was like and what they had to face, so they could enter with preparation. "Master Ling, you've gone too far. We're in the same boat, you shouldn't be so selfish." Everyone continued to criticize, wanting to force Ling Han to give in through public anger. Idiots! Ling Han planned on warning everyone, but now he changed his mind. Whether these people lived or died, what did it have to do with him? He walked over to Li Si-chan and the others, and said in a low voice, "The second layer is a vast and special space with frightening blood-sucking bugs. Those people who died earlier were sucked dry of blood by those blood-sucking bugs." Without Ling Han mentioning how fierce the battle was with the blood-sucking bugs, looking at those 6 corpses, they knew that those blood-sucking bugs were definitely terrifying. The 3 revealed shocked expressions. Li Si-chan and Guang Yuan were all right, since they knew that Ling Han possessed the Black Tower and could hide in there if the worst comes to the worst, but Yu Kai-yu really frowned deeply. "Then what do we do?" Yu Kai-yu asked. Ling Han laughed and then said, "Wait." When the rock spirit recovered, the power of a flower blossom tier could easily suppress that bug nest. The strange thing was that he ran out, but the blood-sucking bugs didn't chase outside, seemingly unable to pass through that door. The people here were elites and prodigies from various sects, so they definitely had treasures with great lethality like spirit talismans, law decrees, and the like, just the time for them to expend those things. Ling Han just stayed silent and the other people couldn't do anything about it. Wo could force a heaven-grade alchemist to open up? At this moment, more and more people entered the divine temple, all gathering here. Many flower blossom tier warriors in their 30s entered the mystery realm, but none appeared nearby, so there were only a few spiritual pedestal tier and spiritual ocean tier elites here, with Li Si-chan being the only gushing spring tier 1. Reality was so, those who were too weak couldn't snatch a treasure even if they discovered it and could only draw support from the environment here to cultivate, rising by 1 or 2 small tiers by the time they left. "Let's go, since someone broke in and came out alive, can we not?" Someone began to connect with various people, planning to charge into the second layer. "That's right, everyone is in the spiritual pedestal tier. If he can go, I can go too. Let's go." These people were in the prime of youth, and while they didn't dare to become hostile with Ling Han on the surface, not a single one of them was convinced about him as they clamored one after another. At last, a party of over 100 people was formed, planning to charge into the second layer. They actually weren't foolish. The vanguard was a strongly built man who focused on Earth-type arts and had an extremely tough physique. On top of that, someone lent their defensive spirit tool, so even if a flower blossom tier elite lay in ambush, he could take a hit head-on without dying. These people charged out and no longer made a single sound. The entrance separated 2 worlds, and no light nor sound would be transmitted over. After waiting a while, Ling Han's consciousness entered the Black Tower,
and seeing that the rock spirit had completely reconstructed and recovered its energy, he cracked a smile and said, "Go, we should go in now. Si-chan, you stay on the outside." While Yu Kai-yu turned around, he directly stored Li Si-chan into the Black Tower. "Huh, where's Lady Li?" Yu Kai-yu turned around, and when he didn't see Li Si-chan, his face was filled with surprise. "She left," Ling Han said without thinking. "That fast?" Yu Kai-yu cried out. How was it possible in the time that he turned? "Yep." Ling Han nodded. Guang Yuan laughed suppressingly. Ling Han took the vanguard and the three walked in a single file up the stairs, entering the second layer. Instantly, a great battle between bugs and men appeared in front of them. Infinite blood-sucking bugs flew in the air and launched attacks at the human martial artists. The insect corpses piled up thickly on the ground, while over 20 people died on the human side, all turned into dried corpses. As more and more of the blood-sucking bugs died, the blood-sucking bugs in the entire area began to go crazy. All the bugs within 100 meters radius flew up and circled in the sky, turning into a tornado that swept towards everyone. This was a completely different style of battle. The blood-sucking bugs earlier relied on the advantage in numbers and launched attacks from various angles, but fundamentally speaking, they still acted on their own, lacking coordination. Now it was completely different as the billions of blood-sucking bugs turned into a single body, sweeping at everyone. Chapter 478. Small Black Temple. Reverie _. The blood-sucking bugs covered the entire sky as if stirring up a locust plague. However, they ate not crops, but fresh blood. The bug tornado swept over, and instantly, several corpses drained dry were tossed out. No one could stand a single exchange of blows. Such a combination wasn't simply summing up their power, but an exponential increase, reaching infinitely close to the flower blossom tier. The leftover martial artists were greatly shocked, unleashing their ultimate life-saving moves as spirit talismans were torn and law decrees fired out. These were originally used when contending for the most valuable treasures, but now in order to save their lives, they couldn't possibly care. Without their lives, all was over. In an instant, the side of the human martial artist had imposing momentum. No matter how close the bugs were to the flower blossom tier, the spirit talismans created by those in the flower blossom tier could parallel, and the spiritual infant tier law decrees could directly annihilate flower blossom tier warriors. These blood-sucking bugs obviously weren't king tier beasts and couldn't possibly withstand such a violent bombardment. The entire swarm of bugs was almost instantly extinguished. Wang, a blood-sucking bug the size of a human head, flew waveringly out from the tornado. Its wings were somewhat tattered, it was barely able to fly. There was actually still one that slipped through the net. "It's probably the king of the swarm," Ling Han said. It was precisely the arrival of this bug king that changed the swarm's battle style. Earlier, infinite blood-sucking bugs acted on their own, but it gathered all the bugs together, and battling under its command, their power increased by several levels. However, it was also precisely because it gathered all the bugs together that it gave everyone the chance to make a clean sweep, escaping narrowly. The 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier. This bug king's strength was overbearing enough, and secondly, it was enveloped in the center and received relatively less damage, saving its life. The bug king stared at everyone with hateful eyes, yet didn't launch an attack, and instead fluttered its wings to fly higher, running away. "Think you can escape?" Everyone sneered, firing attacks one after another. Instantly, sword chi and saber chi stormed over, slashing towards the sky. However, the bug king was at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier after all. It opened a black shield and blocked everyone's attack, continuing to fly higher. Once it reached a certain height, everyone could only stare blankly. After all, if one didn't enter the flower blossom tier, there wasn't much one could do against opponents that could fly. The bug king looked coldly at everyone. These humans annihilated its subjects, it would definitely come back again and kill all of these humans. It wouldn't be long before it reproduced a large amount of descendants. It retracted its gaze and fluttered its wings again, searching for a safe place to rebuild its swarm army. Shwa, 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 a flash of sword chi struck, emitting resplendent light. The bug king first regarded it as beneath its attention. At such a height, no one could harm it. However, the instant it struck, it knew that it was gravely mistaken. With a pu, the sword chi slashed through,
and its already broken wings were instantly completely severed. It looked shockingly at that human below, absolutely unable to believe there was such a stunning and peerless sword. It could no longer maintain its flying posture, falling straight down from the sky. Ling Han smiled faintly and sheathed Demon Birth Sword. Kill! Everyone charged out, and with a few hits, the Bug King was killed. Unfortunately, although it was at the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier beast, it was dirty and disgusting. No one held any interest in its flesh. So, after confirming the Bug King's death, no one looked at it again. They all looked at Ling Han as that sword attack just now made them all shiver inwardly. The Bug King flew so high, yet Ling Han's sword chi still harmed it. Although the wings were the most fragile, it still made everyone greatly astonished. Ling Han walked to the side of the Bug King and sliced open the Bug King's body with his sword. Looking at it briefly, he saw the beast had no bones, so it naturally wouldn't have any bone patterns, while its wings and shell had nothing of the sort. As expected, this wasn't a king tier, since it didn't have bone patterns. Everyone departed one after another, having great interest in this place and wanting to explore to the bottom of it all. This place was very strange. They clearly came up from the first layer, but one side was now a golden wall, as if they'd come to one side of the divine temple. However, such a large place defied reason to begin with, so more strangeness wasn't strange at all. Since there was only one direction to go, the three followed behind everyone, advancing forward. After walking for about 20 minutes, a building suddenly appeared before them. Its shape was exactly the same as the golden temples outside but much smaller, probably only 3 meters high. It was also completely black, with only one entrance. Everyone halted. The sudden appearance of a building naturally made people want to charge in to have a look. However, this place was quite strange, and everyone was worried about the danger inside. No one was willing to stand out, being the first person to enter. Wang, 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 a strange sound rang. Ling Han's expression instantly changed as he said, "Not good, there are still blood-sucking bugs here." When his voice fell, a black cloud flew out from within the temple, as if to cover the sky and hide the earth, sweeping towards everyone. "Not good!" Everyone cried out. When they fended off the first swarm of bugs, they already used all of their trump cards, but now there was another wave. What could they do? The swarm of bugs already stormed over as everyone hurriedly defended. They couldn't simply wait for their death. With only a moment's effort, everyone retreated one after another. The swarm of bugs was much larger than the previous one and everyone's strength dropped, so they could only fight whilst retreating. "Go, let's go into the temple." Ling Han decided not to retreat but instead advance. In this relatively narrow space, they could weaken the advantage the swarm of bugs had in numbers. The three entered the Black Temple. There was only one layer and it was quite empty. In the middle area, there was a stone table with someone's remains, which was now only a pile of bones on top. Was this an offering used to pay respects to gods? What was that bug swarm all about? "Master Ling, don't you space out." Yu Kai Yu shouted loudly. He and Guang Yuan were battling fiercely, but Ling Han was actually entranced by the remains, making their pressure instantly increase drastically. "A bloody battle can increase your strength," Ling Han said smilingly. He walked with large strides to the side of the remains, but without going near. He felt an indescribable pressure as if it were going to shatter his entire body. "How terrifying!" Ling Han revealed a shocked expression. The remains were definitely not ordinary when their owner was Olivia, at least a shattering void-tier existence. That was the only explanation why he'd feel as if his divine sense was being cut by swords and sabers. It could even be a god-tier being. Chapter 479. Two Great Spirits of the Five Elements. Reverie _ This was a set of divine bones. Although countless years passed, its divine nature still remained. Moreover, they definitely weren't the remains of a normal human. There was a horn on the forehead. It was very obvious that the horn was broken, leaving only a small half on its forehead. Moreover, legs and arms had winged bones, which were also broken. It could be imagined that when this god was alive, its arms and legs had extremely sharp blade-like bones that protruded. This isn't a human, but could it be a beast's human transformation? Ling Han's heart palpitated. He had read in ancient records that when beasts advanced into god tier, they could exuviate their beast body and change into human form. Some humans possessed the bloodlines of great ancient beasts like Feng Yan, so it was very possible that it was after a beast became a god and transformed, having offspring with a human, which resulted in a trace of a beast's bloodline to be inherited. No matter what, these were precious bones. Without another word, Ling Han was going to store the remains into the Black Tower, but he immediately discovered that his idea couldn't be carried out. What happened? Could god-tier items not be stored inside the Black Tower? No. He immediately discovered a blood-sucking bug the size of a fist flying out from within the remains. It stared at him and emitted a shocking chill. A flower blossom tier existence. Hiss. Ling Han suddenly understood, could these blood-sucking bugs be born from the god's corpse? That was why it could be unafraid of a god's oppressiveness after death, and not worry about dying from having no food to eat. They normally resided inside the god's remains, absorbing the god's presence. Damn it, what the hell was this place exactly? Was it using a god as sacrifice? Mother! Yu screamed in fright. They were giving it all to block the blood-sucking bugs from the outside and could barely defend, relying on the narrow passageway. However, Ling Han attracted another bug king, one that was at the flower blossom tier. Don't be nervous. You guys keep dealing with the small ones, leave the big one up to me, Ling Han said smilingly as he waved his right hand, summoning the rock spirit. At this moment, rock spirit had already completely recovered. The earth was solid, and the rock spirit it birthed also inherited this strong point. Its defensive power was shocking, and its recovery power was also shocking. As long as it wasn't annihilated on the spot, it would soon recover to as it usually was. Once the rock spirit appeared, it roared at the Bug King, the sound waves like blades. The Bug King was small, but its flower blossom tier strength was bare to see. It wasn't afraid at all and fluttered its wings. Wang wang wang. It swept up a whirlwind that greeted the sound waves. Poo, pu, pu, pu. The whirlwind and the sound waves collided, raising a shock wave. The rock spirit sound wave clearly had the advantage. Although it was weakened a bit, it still shattered the two whirlwinds, continuing to fire at the Bug King. Ling Han nodded inwardly. The rock spirit wasn't a beast, but a miraculous being birthed by heaven and earth. In terms of ranking, it was not only a king amongst beasts, but even a king amongst kings. Similar to how one who cultivated 7 flashes of sword chi could be called a king amongst sword users, and those who cultivated 10 flashes were also kings, but could the two types of kings be the same? The Bug King flapped its wings as it charged at the rock spirit, extremely fast, obviously trying to take advantage of the rock spirit's sluggishness. The rock spirit's movements certainly weren't as fast as the Bug King's. Only when the Bug King stung its mouth part at its heart did it finally sweat over. The Bug King already started to suck blood. As long as it drained its opponent's blood dry, no matter how strong, the opponent would simply turn into a corpse. However, only when it sucked did it discover. Damn it, where was the blood? Pang! The rock spirit's palm already hit. Its speed wasn't ridiculously fast, but when the attack was fired, coming to the peak of its speed, it was also ridiculously fast. This was about the same as hitting a fly. The rock spirit loosened its hand and the Bug King instantly fell down, but then it flew up again after falling halfway down. It stared at the rock spirit with hatred and confusion. Can't suck blood, could this already be a corpse? But how can a corpse be so alive and kicking? Limited by the growth environment, even if the Bug King already advanced into the flower blossom tier, its experiences and its intelligence were quite limited, so it was confused all of a sudden. It was confused, but the rock spirit wasn't, roaring loudly as 36 hairs grew on top of its head. The power of heaven and earth was drawn, and instantly, a dazzling white lightning fired out along with its fist. Tiandu Thunderstar Array. Unfortunately, this was only a 5th tier formation, and its effects weren't optimal against a flower blossom tier Bug King, but against normal small blood-sucking bugs, the destructive power was too great. All come here! Ling Han yelled. Yu and Guang Yuan hurriedly ran over, but when large amounts of blood-sucking bugs surged in, they suffered the bombardment of the power of lightning, being instantly electrified to ashes. This was produced by a formation and relied on the power of heaven and earth, having no need at all for rock spirit to initiate it. The rock spirit only needed to control the lightning so that it didn't strike the three of them. She. The Bug King was furious, sending out an ear-piercing screech. Immediately, countless blood-sucking bugs gathered around the Bug King as their center, turning into a black-colored tornado. It was gathering the power of the swarm, assembling parts into a whole. With it as the core, adjusting from the center, it fired out the swarm's power as one. However, a problem immediately appeared. The Black Temple was only 3 meters high, and for the rock spirit, which was 10 times shorter, this height was just enough to display its abilities, but for the swarm, it was too narrow. The rock spirit took the chance to attack. The power of lightning erupted and had a powerful restraining effect against evil things. The tornado kept being weakened, while the power in the rock spirit's punch was unaffected at all, continuing to fire at the Bug King that was at the core. Pong! A fist shot out and the entire swarm of bugs immediately dispersed. The Bug King flew out and emitted strange squeaks, appearing extremely furious. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Small fire, come out to help." Hong, a flame flew out and turned into appearance of a small dog, circling Ling Han's legs. The corner of Ling Han's mouth twitched involuntarily. He summoned strange fire to help fight alongside the rock spirit, not to let this guy mimic a dog and act cute. Go! He threw a kick and the small dog that strange fire turned into was kicked towards the swarm. A large swarm of blood-sucking bugs truly thought strange fire was food, so they dove at it one after another. But strange fire also cast off its cute mask, turning into a terrifying apocalyptic being. Hong, the flame swirled past, and instantly a large swarm of bugs was burnt into ashes. The strange fire currently could even help Ling Han refine heaven-grade medicinal pills, at least comparable to a flower blossom tear, and strange fire was a natural nemesis for the swarm of bugs. With small fire's eruption, the entire swarm of bugs hurriedly stayed far away from small fire as if they'd encountered their natural enemy. Even the Bug King revealed a look of fear. All things had natural nemesis, and strange fire was definitely the natural enemy of the blood-sucking bugs. If the Bug King wanted to fight against small fire, then it had to be at least 5 to 6 small tiers higher. Besides, there was still another spirit of the 5 elements. Chapter 480. Red-Haired Beasts. Reverie _. The massive golem blocked the door, while the strange fire blocked the enemy's retreat, extinguishing the army of bugs continuously. After merely 10 minutes, the Bug King was a general without an army. The rock spirit and the strange fire charged up, and the former suppressed the Bug King with brute force while the latter burned it. After a few minutes, the flower blossom tear Bug King was utterly burned into ashes. Rock spirit was only burnt black, recovering to normal with a gentle wipe. If the rock spirit fought with the strange fire's high heat would be useless against the rock spirit, but rock spirit's attacks might not harm strange fire's real body. The two were probably in a relation where neither one could do anything about the other. Of course, this was a situation where the two were at the same tier. Otherwise, the strange fire could also boil rocks into ash, and the rock spirit could also extinguish the flames. Master Ling, you truly have heaven-defying fortune. A powerful puppet on top of the ball of the strange fire. You could do whatever you want amongst flower blossom tier beings. Yu highly praised, revealing a look of admiration. Flower blossom tier creature surpassed mortals, and even though he was not far from the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, maybe about 2 or 3 years' time, advancing from the 9th layer of the spiritual pedestal tier to the flower blossom tier might take 5 years, 10 years, or even 20 years wouldn't be rare. Ao Feng was Winter Moon Sect's strongest genius in 100 years. But wasn't he also over 40 when he advanced into the flower blossom tier? Yu Zhanshan was now still at the half-step flower blossom tier, and crossing that other half a step might take him until tomorrow, or he might not take it for another 20 years. Perhaps, there might be no hope in this life. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "Brother, you can just call me by name or Master Han. Master Ling and whatnot makes me seem old." You obviously didn't dare to call Ling Han by name. This was a heaven-grade alchemist who had astonishing means, killing even a flower blossom tier Bug King. He would rather be prudent. Then Master Han it is. Ling Han laughed inwardly. If Yu knew his true identity, would he be angered from embarrassment?
He walked towards the remains again, and resisted the soul spirit severing pain with great difficulty, enveloping the remains to store it inside the black tower. "Ah!" he yelled tragically as blood gushed out of his mouth, nose, ears and eyes.
He appeared extremely tragic.
However, the divine bones were stored inside the black tower. It wasn't to no avail. He slumped onto the ground, breathing heavily. "Master Han, how are you?"
Guang Yuan and Yu Kai-yu both asked.
They naturally saw the remains disappear, but that simply storing a corpse could make the 7 apertures bleed was truly strange. Ling Han wiped the blood on his face and said, "I'm fine." The 3 circled around the Black Temple, seeking for anything that might be left. Nothing was found, but the surrounding walls were carved with many characters, or rather symbols.
They understood nothing.
The 3 of them felt like they'd never learned to read, looking at the wall full of words and being unable to recognize even a single one.
Were these characters from the God realm? Ling Han said inwardly.
He knew something others didn't. This mystery realm was most probably severed from the God realm, so the words that appeared here could also be divine words. Wasn't it normal that mortals couldn't understand divine words?
Whatever, let's go.
They left the Black Temple and the world had already reverted to its brightness. Even the Bug King was eliminated, so as the remaining bugs were limited, they were very soon extinguished thoroughly. However, the battle was just now a bit chaotic, and the people could no longer be seen in the surroundings.
It was unknown where they ran off to. Ling Han didn't care. The 3 continued onwards.
Advancing for about 5,000 meters, another Black Temple appeared in front of them.
"Don't tell me there's another swarm of bugs in there?" Yu Kai-yu said with lingering fear.
"Then that would be too great,"
Ling Han said smilingly.
With a swarm of bugs, it meant that there should be another divine skeleton inside just for him to take.
Yu Kai-yu couldn't help but roll his eyes.
How could there be such a strange person? That temple didn't have any treasures. Did you really like fighting with those bugs that much?
Guang Yuan gave him a sympathetic look.
Following Ling Han for a while, he knew just how much Ling Han loved to adventure. They entered the Black Temple, and as expected, encountered a nest of bugs. Ling Han summoned the golem and the strange fire once again, smoothly extinguishing the bugs. But this time, the Bug King didn't fight to the death and ran away. Ling Han didn't think of chasing it and just took away the divine bones on the sacrificial table, naturally bleeding from 7 apertures. His divine sense one was like it was being cut, almost tearing him into pieces.
"I can't stand any more."
If he took another corpse, his soul would definitely be scattered, turning him into an empty shell. Ling Han felt deeply regretful. These were divine remains, and even if it had no divine essence remaining, the bones alone had huge research value. He could only wait until his divine sense recovered to take it again.
The 3 continued on.
This space of this layer was huge, and every 5,000 meters would be a Black Temple. They avoided it from afar, so no swarm of bugs stormed at them. After walking for 500,000 meters, they finally reached the layer's end. Ahead was a grand golden wall, and on the side were stairways to the next layer.
They weren't the first to arrive.
Amongst those who were separated earlier, 1/3 came here, about 20 people or so. No one recklessly headed towards the 3rd layer, because they already had a hard time in the 2nd layer and wasted many spirit talismans and even law decrees, obtaining nothing in return. If it were the same in the 3rd layer, and with even greater danger, then they definitely wouldn't want to go up. Ling Han was naturally unafraid. However, when he was about to enter the stairway, he was startled, turning his head to look into the distance. Influenced by him, Yu Kai-yu and Guang Yuan also followed his gaze, but saw nothing. They didn't cultivate the eye of truth, so their eyesight couldn't be compared to Ling Han's at all.
"Something's coming," Ling Han warned.
Guang Yuan and Yu Kai-yu hurriedly prepared for battle. The other people couldn't see anything, which instantly made some people despise and curse Ling Han inwardly for acting cool and all. However, in a short while, something red flashed in the distance, and in an instant, it was even closer.
Hiss!
When everyone could see it, they all gasped in astonishment. These were 6 red-haired beasts in the form of humans. Their height was normal, and their entire body was full of red hair. Even their looks couldn't be clearly seen. Indistinctly, a pair of gleaming red eyes and a fierce-looking mouth could be seen.
These red-haired beasts had no intention of communicating with them. Once they arrived, they immediately launched attacks. Xiao, xiao, xiao. They were ridiculously fast as they leapt towards one person.
People had no sense of propriety all of a sudden, and those who weren't attacked naturally didn't recklessly intervene, carefully observing.
The person that was attacked sneered and said, "Scatter." He swung his sword.
7 flashes of sword chi waved as martial intent manifested and condensed into 7 large mountains, about to crush the 6 red-haired beasts.
He cultivated earth-type arts, and when martial intent was produced, it turned into a lofty mountain.
This was a phantom form, but its weight was not fake at all. Even those who were his match in strength would feel it unbearable if they were struck.
Chapter 481. Unkillable Beasts. Reverie _ The 6 red-haired beasts didn't dodge at all and continued their assault. The lofty mountain came crashing and they each threw a punch at it. As origin power rippled, cracks appeared on the mountain, but it did not shatter. Pong, 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 pong. They were struck one after another but simply stumbled and then fiercely continued their assault.
Such sturdy defense.
Ling Han nodded.
Although it couldn't be compared with his iron sheet body, it was still quite surprising. Spiritual pedestal tier beings that could cultivate such defense were definitely sadly rare.
Humph, nothing more than this. The man who was attacked snorted, sliding backwards and raising his sword again. Another 7 flashes of sword chi were fired out.
Let's help. The other people could also see clearly that the red-haired beast's strength was not that great, so they were naturally undaunted. However, at this moment, the 6 red-haired beasts simultaneously emitted crimson light and charged past that man's sword chi, arriving before him. 5 red-haired beasts grabbed onto his 4 limbs and head, and the last one clutched onto the body.
Pooh!
Under everyone's shocked gazes, the 5 red-haired beasts applied force altogether, tearing off that man's 4 limbs and head.
Blood splattered as if dyeing the skies red. Too violent, and too gory. Everyone froze. Such a sight was unacceptable to them.
Pa, 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 pa. The 6 red-haired beasts tossed the head and limbs in their hands and targeted another person, charging out in unison.
Suppress them together, people hurriedly shouted. They definitely wouldn't be crushed one by these 6 red-haired beasts. The two sides battled fiercely.
The humans naturally had the numerical advantage and stronger battle prowess, but these red-haired beasts were like undying monsters. Despite being pierced by a sword or cut by a saber, no drop of blood spilled out, as if they were puppet monsters. Moreover, they had a special ability. When their body flashed with red light, they could ignore attacks of origin power by passing through them, creating a huge problem for everyone. They clearly had more numbers and were clearly stronger, but they were beaten pathetically by the 6 red-haired beasts.
Strange, what's this ability?
Ling Han muttered as curiosity flickered in his gaze. Could this be another special ability of creatures from the God realm?
Master Han, should we help? Guang Yuan asked. Help and be careful. Ling Han nodded. Yes.
Guang Yuan immediately charged out, while Yu Kai-yu scratched his head and said, "Strange, why should I listen to this guy?"
As he said that, he also charged out, full of fighting spirit. Ling Han didn't intervene and simply kept an eye out as he observed.
He would intervene when Guang Yuan and Yu Kai-yu encountered danger, but he would mostly observe. He had never heard of these peculiar red-haired beasts. As his gaze swept by, he revealed an astonished expression because a surprising change was happening to the dismembered pulps. Strands of red hair grew from the flesh, and as if possessing life, the head, hands, and feet wriggled towards the torso.
Soon, the 6 parts assembled, forming a complete human body, but covered with red hair. A new red-haired beast appeared. A flash of lightning streaked across Ling Han's mind as a guess started welling up in his mind. Could these 6 red-haired beasts be the 6 corpses that were annihilated at the earliest time? He immediately dashed out and unleashed the demon birth sword, slicing at a red-haired beast. As sword chi waved, red hair flew into the sky. The red-haired beast was instantly shaved clean, revealing a dry corpse-like body. It even had a few tattered pieces of cloths on it.
Luo Heng,
a martial artist said quaveringly.
He's Luo Heng.
I recognize the tattoo on his hand.
Ling Han focused his gaze, and as expected, the red-haired beast had a tattoo on its arm. Although it was very hard to distinguish, it was still barely visible that it was drawing of a fierce tiger. Everyone was shocked. Luo Hang entered the second layer the earliest and ended up being one of the 6 people turned into a dried corpse by the blood-sucking bugs. Why did he suddenly revive as a red-haired beast? Another one. Someone discovered a 7th red-haired beast, though it just stood up with a stagger, not yet joining the battle. "Where's Su Ming's corpse?" someone said quaveringly. Everyone cried out involuntarily. These dried corpses could turn into red-haired beasts, so why couldn't a dismembered corpse also? Where the hell was this the dead could resurrect, though it couldn't be counted as truly reviving? Ling Han struck again and activated 2 vein-like patterns on the demon birth sword. He wouldn't believe that a 10th-tier spirit tool couldn't kill these monsters. Pu, his figure flashed across, and with one strike, a red-haired beast was split into 2. But then a strange thing occurred: the 2 halves of the red-haired beast stuck back together, recovering as a whole. An undying monster. Ling Han decided on spot and said, "Go to the 3rd layer." Yu Kai Yu and Guang Yuan naturally had no objections to his words, immediately ascending onto the steps and charging towards the 3rd layer. Ling Han stored the demon birth sword and also leapt onto the steps. Even Ling Han, who had such powerful battle prowess, ran. How could the other people dare to tangle? These red-haired beasts couldn't be killed, and even if someone hit a spiritual infant tier law decree, would that be able to suppress them? Ling Han might have ascended onto the steps later than Guang Yuan and Yu Kai Yu, but he caught up and surpassed them, and with a sudden big stride forward, he was the first to enter the 3rd layer. The scenery immediately changed. This was actually a primeval forest with tall arbors everywhere, countless intertwining old vines on them, thicker and larger than a house. Who knew how many years it took to grow to such a scale? However, in the distance, a divine temple stood erect at the mountaintop, with golden-colored brilliance. Xiao, Guang Yuan and Yu Kai Yu also leapt over, and then more people appeared. However, not a single red-haired beast charged over, as if each layer had a strict limitation. Ayo! A beast's roar sounded from afar as if it could tear open the sky. Everyone was startled. Even from such a distance, they could feel the terrifying oppressive power in that roar. It was at least a flower blossom tier, and even possibly a spiritual infant tier beast. What to do? Below were red-haired beasts that couldn't be killed, and above were flower blossom, and even spiritual infant tier beasts. It was a true dilemma. Ling Han only looked at the golden divine temple at the mountaintop in the distance. He had a feeling that their answers might be obtained over there. The secrets relating to this divine temple. Go! He nodded towards Guang Yuan and Yu Kai Yu. The 3 set out and walked towards the divine temple in the distance. The other people shrugged. The mountaintop might not look far, but it was definitely not close by, and who knew how many terrifying beasts they'd encounter. Let's charge back. That's right. Although the red-haired beasts aren't killable, their battle prowess isn't ridiculously strong. It's better than facing spiritual infant tier beasts. Let's go back. Most people turned tail, with only a few people that decided to advance along with the 3 of them. At least with the 3 of them scouting ahead, if there really was danger, the 3 would be first to endure it. However, these people were immediately stunned, because Ling Han summoned the golem and the 3 stood on its back, with the golem carrying them as they flew towards the mountaintop. Chapter 482. The Last Divine Temple. Reverie _. How did this work? The few people that wanted to take advantage of Ling Han were disappointed. Ling Han had a flying tool, yet they could only run on their feet, unable to rely on Ling Han to block perils for them. They immediately gave up on following, and when they turned around, 3 people walked out in a flash. These 3 people looked 30 years old, all male, and emitted a shocking presence, making everyone bow down and lower their heads involuntarily. Flower Blossom Tier Warriors. Respects to Lord Miao, Lord Gu, and Lord Gung. Everyone knelt on one knee, paying respects to those 3 people. Miao Qi Si, Gu Yuan Liang, Gung Jing Shang were figures on the prodigy roll several generations ago, who had now advanced into the Flower Blossom tier, becoming mainstays of each of their own sects. They might even advance into the spiritual infant tier and become the most powerful figures in the North region.
Miao Qi raised his hand, signaling everyone to rise.
His gaze was the same as Gu Yuanliang and Geng Jingshang, fixed on the divine temple at the mountaintop.
Let's go.
Gu Yuanliang tapped the ground with his feet, his figure floating into the air, while Miao Qi and Geng Jingshang also followed. Haha, with the 3 flower blossom tier elite's appearance, even if Ling Han discovered treasure, he wouldn't be able to get it, someone said gloatingly. Humph, just a flower blossom tier puppet, it can't possibly be compared to a true flower blossom tier.
So what if he's an heaven-grade alchemist? Adventuring in a mystery realm, no one needs to give them face.
That's right, as an alchemist, he should just stick to refining pills.
Quite a few people chimed in, all envious of Ling Han.
The rock spirit might look a bit foolish and its explosive power starting out was a bit weak, but once its speed increased, it wasn't any slower than a flower blossom tier warrior. They arrived at the mountaintop after only a few minutes. The massive golem landed while the 3 of them leapt down. Although there were various living creatures in this layer, the space wasn't too large. Ling Han had already scanned the surroundings while in the sky, and didn't discover any stairway that led to the 4th layer.
In other words, this layer was the last layer.
His guess was quite right. This last divine temple had a great possibility of revealing the secrets about this place. The golden divine temple was 30 m tall and gold all over, just like the large divine temple outside but shrunken by 10-fold.
Small rock, you take the vanguard. Ling Han patted the rock spirit.
The rock spirit naturally wouldn't object, walking at the forefront.
The 3 followed closely behind.
With a flower blossom tier rock spirit blocking the front, Ling Han had enough assurance to store Guang Yuan, Yu Kai Yu, and the rock spirit at the most dangerous time. Beyond expectations, the inside of the divine temple was made of golden walls, extremely bright and unlike those black temples which were empty. There were stone pillars here, only a meter tall and with the top forged into an empty basin shape. The entire divine temple only had 1 layer, so the space was extremely large. Walking inside made the 3 feel their own insignificance. There were no supportive pillars inside the temple. It simply relied on the 3 walls leaning against each other to support the weight. Rows of stone pillars reached the center of the divine temple where a hexagonal object was suspended in midair, circling continuously extremely strange.
So fragrant. The 3 of them wrinkled their noses.
Eat. The rock spirit also sent Ling Han a thought, but it stared at the stone pillars on the ground.
Go eat. Ling Han waved his hand. But don't bloat yourself.
The rock spirit was instantly extremely delighted, diving in front of a stone pillar. Its head cracked open, as if opening a large mouth, biting towards the basin. With a snap, it bit off half the stone basin and began to gnaw on it, eating delightfully. The 3 of them ran to the closest stone pillar closest to the hexagonal object, and saw that the stone basin actually had a tiny bit of milky white liquid within it which was emitted the surprising fragrance.
What's this thing? Yu Kai Yu asked.
Ling Han shook his head and said, I don't know either, but I'm sure that it's definitely absolute spiritual liquid, which possesses extremely great value.
So you guys can get lost.
A cold voice sounded as Miao Qi and the other 2 took large strides over, clearly not caring about Ling Han's heaven-grade alchemist identity. In the outside world, heaven-grade alchemists naturally had a status that surpassed the norm, but when contending for treasure, all was based on strength. It was impossible for others to surrender treasures just because someone else was the son of a shattering void tier. It was the same for heaven-grade alchemist. Ling Han said to Guang Yuan and Yu Kai Yu, you guys store away the spiritual liquid. He turned around, waved at the rock spirit, and said, Small rock, come, time to fight. The rock spirit was somewhat reluctant as it was eating delightfully, but who made it acknowledge Ling Han as its master? It instinctively glared fiercely at Miao Qi and the others. It was these 3 who interrupted its delicious meal, making it extremely angry. Seeing the mysterious patterns on the rock spirit, Miao Qi and the others said in astonishment, a puppet. They naturally saw those patterns as formation patterns. They could feel the golem's power, emitting a presence that they didn't dare to look down upon. Master Ling, you might be an alchemy genius that the world reveres, but since entering the historic site to contend,
You'll need to have awareness as a martial artist. Gu Yuan Liang opened up. If you force me to attack, I won't show mercy. Ling Han cracked a smile and said, Is that right? Stop. Seeing Guang Yuan and Yu Kai Yu take out a jade bottle to receive the spiritual liquid within the stone basin, there was no way Miao Qi Si and the others could hold back, attacking one after another to stop them from taking the spiritual liquid. Ang! The rock spirit roared angrily and attacked towards them, while Ling Han unleashed the demon birth sword and activated the thunder battle armor, slashing at the three large hands of origin power. Pooh! As sword chi waved, Ling Han sliced open the three large hands of origin power, not letting them hit Yu Kai Yu and Guang Yuan. However, he was only at the second layer of the spiritual pedestal tier, and even with the thunder battle armor's protection, he still couldn't bear the immense shock. Wah! He hacked out blood. It was just like 3 lives corpse casket. Even a shattering void tier elite couldn't possibly crush the casket, but if a heaven tier elite lay inside, they'd definitely be pounded into pulp with shock waves. Being able to block a direct attack and counteracting the power of the impact were two different things. Ling Han was in unexpectedly high spirits. With the protection of the thunder battle armor, he could endure such an impact, and as long as it wasn't a one-hit kill, he could immediately restore to as he was with the recovery power of the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Of course, it was most important that he cultivated the Iron Sheep body. If anyone else came, he would be heavily injured with the protection of the thunder battle armor. After all, Flower Blossom tier beings were way too powerful. Then let's battle, Ling Han said. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.